April Tennessee Real Estate Commission meeting. We have a formal hearing scheduled for this morning. The matter of Jonathan Foster, docket number 12.18-156682A. And at this point, unless there's some objection, I'm going to turn the proceedings over to Judge Barnhill. Judge, and if you don't, never want to tell a judge what to do, but if you'll speak into that microphone.
You'll find before the day's over, you might have to tell me more than once.
All right, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll go ahead and get started and get a record going for this hearing. Today is April the 18th, 2019. As the chairman indicated, this is a hearing conducted before the Tennessee Real Estate Commission in Nashville, Tennessee. It's docket number 12.18-156682A. The case number is REC-2018-01559-1. And at this point, if counsel would introduce themselves for the record and also tell us who they represent.
My name is Kelsey Bridges, and I'm representing the state.
My name is Grover Collins. I represent Jonathan Forster, who's sitting not immediately to my left, but to my left. And I'm also accompanied by Seth Klein.
All right. And I'm Shannon Barnhill. I've been assigned by the Secretary of State to sit with the Commission for today's hearings. I'll make rulings regarding the order of proceedings, admissibility of evidence, and questions of law under the authority granted me by the Tennessee Administrative Procedures Act. I'll not participate in the findings of fact or the ultimate decision of this Commission. Those decisions will be made by the Commission members. And at this time, I'll ask the Commission members to introduce themselves for the record.
All right, Bobby.
I'm Bobby Wood. Austin McMullen.
Marcia Franks.
John Grease.
Jeff Diaz.
Fontaine Taylor.
All right, thank you. Members of the Commission are reminded that during the time this hearing is being conducted, no discussion of this case should take place between Commission members, witnesses, attorneys, or other persons unless all parties are present. This Commission sits like a jury and must only consider evidence introduced at the hearing in reaching its decision. The Tennessee Sunshine Law requires all Commission discussion and deliberations to be in public before all parties. Failure to observe the Sunshine Law may result in the Commission's action being reversed or remanded if appealed. During this hearing, you may not use any electronic device or media, such as any type of smartphone, tablet, or computer, any internet service, or any text or instant messaging service, or any other electronic means to communicate any information to anyone, to receive information from anyone, or to conduct research about this case. At this point, does counsel for the state mind distributing the notice of charges? Thank you.
Judge Barnhill, do you have a copy of the notice of hearing and charges in front of you?
I do.
Okay.
Yes,
Just
thank
making
you.
sure you didn't need
I
a
do.
copy as well.
Thank you.
Need one more copy.
Everyone short.
I've got
We can
two.
do that.
I have two stapled together.
Oh, I do too. Okay.
So we have extra.
Good.
Right. I just want to make sure at this point that the commission members have had a chance to read through, and I'll give you a couple more minutes because I need to ask about disclosures once you've familiarized yourself with that notice.
Right, Your Honor, I think.
All right, thank you. Before going any further, then, I have to remind the board that the commission, that the commission must disclose on the record any outside knowledge of this case or any communication with any of the parties or the attorneys involved in this case. At this point, does any of the commission members have anything they need to disclose on the record? All right, having seen none, I'll introduce the technical record. In my file, I have a notice of hearing and charges filed in my office on January the 9th of this year. I also have a pre-hearing order entered by Judge Carter Ball on January 16th, 2019. I have a notice of affidavit filed by Ms. Bridges on behalf of the Department of Commerce and Insurance. I have a order of continuance that was entered on February the 11th, 2019, that continued the matter to today. I also have the, I believe this is the state's witness and exhibit list. Yeah, the state's witness and exhibit list that was filed on April the 11th. I have a notice of proposal to introduce affidavit into evidence. These are on behalf of Mr. Forrester. I have one for Ms. Germanson, one for Ms. Shelton, for Mr. Youngwall, one for Mr. Griffith. Second, because I believe yes. the last thing which I skipped is a motion to continue that was filed on February 5th. I'm sorry for taking that out of order. That would have been filed, obviously, before the order of continuance was entered. Those are the documents that I have in the technical record. Does anyone have anything that I've missed?
We also submitted a witness list that included 2 witnesses. Do you have?
Let's see. I may have gotten stuck to something else. When was that filed, Mr. Collins?
Filed on April 9th.
All right. Well, it should definitely be in this file.
Filed along with our answer.
I don't have either one of those, but I will make a note.
I can give you a copy.
All right. Thank you very much. Sir. So we will also include Mr. Forrester's answer to the notice of hearing and charges. That was filed on April 9th. I also now have Mr. Forrester's witness list. Does that conclude? Does that make a complete technical record as far as we know?
As far as I know, yes.
All right. Very good. All right. Pursuant to the uniform rules for hearing contested cases, the state has the burden of proof in this matter, so the state will present its evidence first. Then the respondent will be given the opportunity to present his case. Although evidence is presented by asking witnesses questions, the questions themselves are not evidence. Because the commission is the party with the burden of proof in this case, it's the commission's burden to establish that there was a cause for him to be disciplined. During the course of this hearing, there will be an opportunity for each of you to question each witness who testifies under oath. Please use your questions to gain any information or clarification of the facts that you feel would assist you in reaching a decision in this case. You must reserve any expression of opinion you may have to that portion of the hearing that is set aside for the commission's deliberations, which will happen after all the proof has been entered. Commission members should not draw any conclusions until all of the proof has been submitted. Please listen to all the proof with an open mind. Statements and arguments by the attorneys are not evidence. They are only made to help you understand the evidence and apply the law to the evidence in this case and to persuade you of that party's position in this case. You should ignore any statement by counsel that is not supported by evidence. All right. Are the parties ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Do you want to go ahead with an opening statement?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Your Honor. Today's hearing is a fairly simple matter. The subject is commingling, more specifically, commingling that occurred under Mr. Forrester's watch. The proof will show that in March of 2018, the Commission received a complaint in which a former administrative assistant for the Brokers Realty and Auction, Mr. Forrester's firm, in which they accused Mr. Forrester of moving funds around between the firm's escrow account and the general operating account. Now, in Mr. Forrester's own answer to that complaint, he admitted to commingling. And although he claimed that there was no harm done, as I'm sure the Commission is well aware, that is completely irrelevant. The Commission's rules do not state that commingling is acceptable as long as nobody is harmed. The rules unequivocally state commingling of funds contained within firm accounts is expressly prohibited. Today, you will also hear proof that numerous funds, totaling nearly $60,000, were transferred between the firm's escrow account and operating account, and on one occasion, the Commission's account, all under Mr. Forrester's supervision. By allowing this to happen, Mr. Forrester violated the trust of his firm's clients, as well as the affiliate brokers under his supervision. And that is why today, Commissioners, the state is asking for the full revocation of Mr. Forrester's license.
All right, thank you. Mr. Collins?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be before you. I'll keep this brief because this is a relatively simple matter in the fact that it does deal with quote-unquote commingling. What you will notice, though, is we have affidavits that we will submit to you from people that work for Mr. Forrester, affiliate brokers that work with, an affiliate broker that works with Mr. Forrester, a client of Mr. Forrester, and the current new admin assistant of Mr. Forrester. The reason this happened is because there was an employee, and also I want you to make you aware that the complainant in this case that started and initiated these proceedings is also the employee that was responsible, we believe, for why this happened. And after dismissal of that employee is what instituted these charges. So I would like respectfully for the board to keep that in mind as we go through this hearing process. Mr. Forrester has been upfront and honest with the investigation, with the board, with anyone who made inquiry into anything that they required. He gave it to them very quickly. At all times here too, Mr. Forrester acted diligently and quickly to rectify the situation. Upon the dismissal of the employee that was the acting admin assistant that was in charge of all of the accounting, including the trust account, upon the dismissal of that, Mr. Forrester hired a CPA to do some forensic accounting. Upon confirming that, and you'll hear this from Mr. Forrester, upon confirming the amounts that were in question, that amount of money was immediately placed back into the escrow account, and at no time was any client or member of the public at large harmed by any portion of this quote-unquote alleged miscommingling. And I think that's very important. At the heart of this matter, we'll be asking you to not revoke Mr. Forrester's license. We would ask you not to downgrade his license, and we're going to ask you to affix an appropriate remedy, and an appropriate remedy in context of there was no actual harm done to, with respect to the regulations. I don't mean to diminish them or the rules at all, but there was no member of the public at large that was harmed. The money was quickly placed back into the account upon knowledge that it had happened, and Mr. Forrester has acted diligently and faithfully in following these regulations throughout the extent of his career. And for those reasons and the proof that you will hear, I will come before you again and ask you not to downgrade or otherwise revoke Mr. Forrester's license. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ms. Bridges, you want to call your first witness?
My first witness is actually going to be through affidavit, the affidavit of the custodian of records, Caitlin Maxwell, the executive director for the Real Estate Commission.
All right.
If it's all right, I can briefly surmise the contents.
I think that would be helpful.
Yes. So this affidavit is certifying Mr. Forrester's licensure record. That begins on page 1 of Exhibit A, and that will show that he was the principal broker during all relevant times. And if you flip towards the end, you'll reach an Exhibit B, and that is the complaint file. It contains the complaint filed by Ms. Joni Kreis, the former employee referenced earlier. And then just a few pages after that begins Mr. Forrester's response to the complaint. And I will note on page 1 of his response, near the middle of the page, Mr. Forrester admits that there was $9,691.70 in the escrow account belonging to the company.
Want to give us time to find this?
Sure. Absolutely. Please take as much time as you need to review. I just wanted to.
So how many
briefly
documents did you just reference?
It's 2 total documents, the license file and the complaint file.
Mentioned Exhibit A. What is that?
That is the licensure file. Begins on the 3rd page of the entire compilation.
Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
So I'm just slightly confused. I understand Exhibit A is an affidavit from the keeper of the records. That's in lieu of testimony, correct?
Right.
Exhibit B appears to be evidence. Are we supposed to absorb this now, or is that what's to be presented to us?
Well, it is being introduced as evidence. You can take time to review it now, or I would assume you could review it later during deliberations. I think it's up to the board as to when you want to review this evidence, if that helps. It is introduced as evidence. The Tennessee Code Annotated allows either party, and I think Mr. Collins will be introducing some affidavits later to introduce this in lieu of testimony. So,
This is in lieu of testimony?
Yes, sir.
So we shouldn't expect testimony on Exhibit B?
I wouldn't think so.
So we can't cross-examine it then either?
No.
Okay.
Chairman, if you will just let me know. If you want time, we'll take time now, and when everybody's done, we can move to the next witness, if that's what you'd prefer.
It would be appropriate at the appropriate time for commissioners or attorneys to ask questions about Exhibit B.
I think Miss Bridges. Miss Bridges might be able to help clarify. Mr. Collins obviously is here as well. If there's anything objectionable, he can object. It's sort of a touchy issue about, she obviously can't testify. She's one of the lawyers. If you have a question about something, we might be able to help with that. But this document essentially stands on its own. So if there's anything confusing about it, I don't know that we have a good solution. Counsel?
All I can offer, I know that you all were flipping through it when I was giving that brief synopsis earlier. I can repeat that if that would be helpful to you now that you've had a chance to flip through. I have to defer to the judge on this matter. Any questions that I can answer, I would be happy to. I guess it's hard to say
Right.
what we can do without knowing what those questions are.
I think if there are some questions, maybe you could ask them, and then if it would be considered testimony, obviously we can't have that. But if it's just for clarification, and Mr. Collins, you can jump in if you need to.
That was all I was going to state, is the board absolutely, in my reading of the rules, has the right to ask questions on any of the exhibits of either attorney or the parties, to the extent that they can ask questions. I mean, I can get into that when we present
All
our
right.
proof and that kind of thing, but to the extent that the board has any questions, it's my position that they can ask the questions of either attorney and
Okay.
take it from there.
Yeah, and that sounds reasonable, as long as we're not getting in. I don't want to get the attorneys into a situation where they're trying to testify, but yeah, okay. So if you want to take a few minutes to review, and then if you have some questions, we can deal with those at that point. Would that work?
We've just never done it this way before. They always testified so that we could ask them questions.
Right.
And this is several
Well,
pages
you won't.
for us to
Yeah,
absorb.
you won't be able to cross-examine the documents if that's what you're asking, because there's no one here to cross-examine. If there's a question about the documents themselves, I believe we could probably help with that. And by we, I mean the attorneys.
We'll do the best we can.
All right.
Would it be possible for us to hear some testimony and then have time after that to review that? Because this is just cold turkey here. We're just
Yes.
presented with this. Would that be a better
Certainly, I think it's
solution?
Yes.
an option.
I'm leaving that up to the board, but if you want time to review it now, that's fine. If you want to review it and ask questions about it later, once other proof has been presented, I think that would be reasonable.
I ask one commissioner a question.
Sure.
Commissioner McMullen, what's your pleasure on this?
I've spent a few minutes looking through it. If everybody's had a chance to look through it, I would think whatever the attorneys are planning to do next, let's go for it.
The judge says we can come back to it if we need to.
Yes.
Let's do that.
All right. Do you want to call a witness?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd now like to call Michelle John Finn, the auditor for the Real Estate Commission.
All right. Or would we have John Finn? Is that how it's pronounced? All right.
I have somebody to swear, Ms. John.
I'll be swearing her in. Do you want to raise your right hand for me? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right. Thank you, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Because of the documentation, is it all right if I proceed from this desk?
Yes.
Do you all mind? Okay. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Michelle John Finn.
Okay. And Miss John Finn, what do you do for a living?
I'm auditor for the Real Estate Commission.
And how long have you been working for the commission?
I started September 2018.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about your education and experience prior to starting this job?
Yes, I have a bachelor's in accounting, also a MBA with a concentration in accounting. In 2007, I started with the Department of Revenue as an auditor. I did that for 5 years, and then I went into the private sector, and I just recently came back for the state. So I've been working in accounting for at least the past 10.
Okay, great. So what are your primary job functions here as an auditor for the Real Estate Commission?
What I do is look at agencies' records to ensure they are maintaining them properly and making sure that the escrow account is being maintained and dispersed when needed.
Okay, and how do you typically go about conducting an audit?
I normally receive the records from the agency, and I review their financial records, including contracts, bank statements, bank recs.
Okay, and did you conduct an audit for the broker's Realty and Auction?
Yes.
Okay, and did you prepare a report to document your findings for that audit?
Yes.
All right. At this time, if I may approach.
Absolutely.
Is that the report that you compiled for that audit for the broker's Realty and Auction?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to admit into evidence the...
Council have a copy?
I do, and I'll pass out copies if that's all right.
I'd like to see it
Yeah.
before we.
Yes.
Yeah. Judge, respectfully, this is the first time we're seeing this document. I believe pursuant to the rules, we should have been provided a copy prior to the hearing. As such, I would lodge my objection to this being introduced as evidence.
Your response?
I would just point out there was never any discovery request. There was never a request to see this document after I delivered the witness and exhibit list. That was delivered to opposing counsel well before this hearing. They had every opportunity to ask for copies of those exhibits, and they did not. I would also say this is a business record, typically evidence that is admissible in a hearing.
If I may respond.
Yes, sir.
Well, we didn't file a formal notice of discovery or request for discovery. We did file a formal public records request requesting any and all documents that were in the file for Mr. Forster. As such, this would have been part of that public record request. That public record request is ongoing from the time that it is entered into the hearing date.
All right. I think based on that, I'm going to sustain the objection to entering this document. It should have been provided to council ahead of time so that they could review it. I think legally it's a solid objection, so I'm going to sustain it.
Okay. In that case, we also have financial records that I would like
Ms. John Finn to look at, and I would also like admitted into evidence. Those records were provided to us directly by Mr. Forrester. If there's not any objection, I would like to proceed with that testimony.
If they're the same ones we submitted, then obviously I wouldn't have an objection. I just don't know what
All
you're
right.
talking about yet.
Well, yeah, let's let counsel see the records you want to admit first, and then he'll know if he has an objection. In the meantime, Ms. Bridges, do you want to enter this as an exhibit? You've supplied it to everyone, but there's been
The affidavit?
Yes, there's been no motion.
Yes, Your Honor. I
Okay.
would like that admitted
All right, then
as
we'll-
the first numbered exhibit.
We'll mark that as Exhibit 1.
It appears to be the documents we've submitted, so there's no
Right.
objection to that.
Thank you, sir. Then we will mark that next document as Exhibit 2.
Yeah, we killed a few trees.
This is Exhibit 2. All I have so far entered is the affidavit of the custodian of records. That was 1, and this is 2. Have I missed anything, counselors?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
I just wanted, for the purposes of the record, I wanted to clarify that Exhibit 1 had an Exhibit A and an Exhibit B within it.
Well, it did. You're right. We'll make we will call that collective Exhibit 1. How about that?
Are we ready to proceed?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Ms. John Finn, the records in front of you, are those the records that you reviewed in conducting the audit for the Brokers Realty and Auction? Okay. If we,
And I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I thought I was going to have a copy to look through as we went through it. but-
okay. I know this is a lot of documentation in front of you, but if you'll first look at the yellow tabbed documents, and if you'll turn to the page that is tabbed August 2017. Can you point out anything that stands out to you from those records?
Yes, this is the escrow ledger, and in August 2017, there were 2 withdrawals and a transfer to the general funds account.
Okay, and what dates did those occur specifically?
August 18th, 2017, August 19th, 2017, and August 21st, 2017.
Okay, and would we find the same in the escrow bank statements? That's the second yellow tabbed
Yes.
document? All right. So if we turn to that page that's August 2017, what would we see there for the bank statements?
The bank statement shows withdrawals and deductions. On August 21st, it says transfer to 01 general funds, and it provides the confirmation number, and the amount is $2,500.
Okay, and then below that, does it show the other 2 transactions that occurred in August?
Yes, those are August 18th and August 21st. Those are two withdrawals. That's why there's no check number, because someone went into the bank and took that money out.
Okay, and I noticed you pointed out that one of those withdrawals, the date is August 21st, even though the Excel spreadsheet that was provided notes that it was on the 19th. Do you believe that is the same withdrawal?
Yes.
And if we were to look at the firm's operating accounts, those are the blue tab documents, would we see the corresponding deposits into the general account?
Yes.
Okay.
Your Honor? My copy doesn't have blue tabs. Do you happen to have another copy with blue tabs? Okay.
All right. I think we left off with the general funds for August 2017. So on that spreadsheet, that deposit is shown. Is that what you were saying, Ms. Johnson?
Yes, the transfer is shown. The withdrawals are not included in the general funds. They were just cash withdrawn from the escrow account.
Okay. And then the same could be documented on the general funds bank statements?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, if we look back at the escrow documentation, on that same page that starts, I believe, with July, and it goes through the middle of October, were there any additional transactions in October that you noticed or took note of?
Yes. On October 6, 2017, there was a transfer to the general funds account in the amount of $2,000. And on October 17, 2017, there was a transfer to the general funds account in the amount of $3,500.
Okay, and we can keep going throughout the month of October. It continues on the next page. What else did you observe in that month?
4 additional transfers to the general account. The next one I noticed in the bank statement was on October 27th, and that was for $2,000. And there were 2 transfers on October 30th, totaling $5,000, one for $2,000 and one for $3,000.
Okay, and again, I'll just ask you to look at the general fund account documentation. Are those transfers also seen as deposits into the general funds account?
Yes.
Okay, and that is on the spreadsheet as well as the bank statements, is that true?
Yes.
All right. Let's keep moving to November. Now, is there any noticeable transfer on the escrow spreadsheet that occurred in the month of November 2017? Okay, what about the bank statements for the escrow account? Was there any transfer noted on the bank statement for November 2017?
Yes. On November 6, 2017, there was a transfer of $2,000 to the general funds account.
Okay, and then like we've done with the other ones, is that transfer also noted as a deposit in the general funds bank statement and escrow, or excuse me, Excel spreadsheet? And that again is for November 2017.
Yes, it is on the general funds ledger and also in the bank statement.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's next go to the month of December 2017. And we're just going to do the same thing. We'll start with the escrow ledger. Did you know any transactions in December 2017?
Yes, on December 6th, there were 2 transfers, both in the amount of $2,000, transferred to the general funds account. On December 18th, there was a transfer in the amount of $1,000 transferred to the general funds account. And that looks like that was it for December 2017.
Okay, and can those deposits be noted on the general funds ledger and bank statements?
They are listed in the general funds ledger as well as the bank statements.
Okay. Let's keep going into January 2018. How many transfers from the escrow account into the general funds account did you note in the month of January 2018?
8.
Okay, and what dates did those occur?
I have 3 transfers on January 2nd, 2018. I have 1 on January 17th, 2018. 1 on January 19th, 2018. 2 on January 22nd, 2018. And then there's 1 on January 25th, 2018.
Okay, and are all of those going to appear on the general funds ledger and bank statements for January 2018?
Yes.
Okay. Let's next go to February 2018, and I promise we're nearing the end. Can you just describe to us what was noted for the month of February 2018? Starting with the escrow ledger.
So on February 5th, there's a transfer. Also, February 14th, 16th, there were 2 on February 20th, 2 on February 21st, and 1 on February 26th.
Okay, and would all of those appear on the general funds statement?
Yes.
Okay. But I believe there may be one. Could we take a look at the commission's documentation? And those are the red tabbed documents. And if you'll specifically turn to February 2018.
Your Honor, before we proceed, I had no objection to the documents being provided by Mr. Forrester. Quite frankly, I didn't know we also had commission documents. If these are things that weren't provided by my client, I would have a general objection to those.
All right.
These were all provided by Mr. Forrester.
All right. Was there any transfer into the commission's account in February 2018 from the firm's escrow account?
Yes, it's the one for February 21st in the amount of $1,500.
Okay, so even though I believe the notice of hearing and charges may have said that went into the general fund account, you're noting that it went into the commission's account?
Yes.
Okay. Next, let's look at the month of April 2018. And once again, I'll ask, were there any notable transfers from the escrow account into any other firm accounts for the month of April 2018?
There is a transfer in April of 2018. It's not it's a check number 1256, and it says it's the brokers, and it's a transfer of owner funds in the amount of $7,591.
Okay, so again, you're saying that it is noted that those are owner funds on the escrow account ledger?
Yes.
Okay. And once again, will the same appear, or did you note the same in the general funds ledger? Did you note any deposits that would match that amount for the month of April 2018?
Yes.
Okay. Next, even though we had just skipped over it, let's look at March 2018.
Yes.
What did you note for that month, if anything?
On March 23rd, there was a transfer from the general funds back into the escrow account. It was in the amount of $35,288.90, and it says that it's a correction. On the same day, there was another transfer correction in the amount of $1,951.40.
Okay. I'd also like you to take a look in the month of March, specifically March 9th. And now we're going to direct our attention to the general funds ledger and bank statements. Did anything of note occur on March 9th, 2018?
On March 9th, there was a cashier's check in the amount of $13,059.70 for a Boones Creek auction. Doug Schultz, attorney.
Okay, and was there any indication what that what the purpose of that check was?
From what I remember from the records, it was for a closing.
Okay. By that, do you mean it was for an earnest money payment? Or
Yes, it was earnest money payment.
Okay, from the firm's general funds account?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. John Finn, I've noted that throughout this ledger that Mr. Forrester provided, a number of times a notation of error was made. In your experience, is that common to see so many errors?
I'm going to object to the relevance.
I mean, this speaks directly towards the issue of management of firm accounts.
Right. Mr. Collins, can you tell me a little bit more about why it's not relevant?
Well, yes, Your Honor. First of all, I would ask that the questions not be leading in nature. But second of all, what the general experience is not what her experience is with these accounts, and it doesn't necessarily follow that because somebody else did one thing means that Mr. Forrester did another. And for that reason, it's not relevant as to what Mr. Forrester did with his accounting.
It's your call, Your Honor.
All right. Well, based on that, then I'll grant the objection. I'll sustain the objection, I should say.
All right. In that case, no further questions for
All
Ms.
right.
John Finn.
Thank you. Cross-examination, Mr. Collins?
Yes, Your Honor, please. And apologies. Could you pronounce your last name for me?
John Finn.
John Finn? Okay. Just want to make sure I was getting that right. Ms. John Finn, you're an auditor for the Department of Commerce and Insurance, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you said you've been in that capacity for how long?
In September of 2018.
And were you the original auditor on this matter?
I was just given the records. I'm not sure if another auditor.
You don't actually go out to the
No.
locations or anything
No.
like that? So is that an investigator?
Yes.
And the investigator goes out, gets all the documentation, brings it back to you?
Yes.
Okay. What I specifically wanted to ask you is there's been an allegation of commingling, right? What is that as you define it?
Commingling is taking funds that belong to someone else and using it for your business use or personal use.
Okay. And you said that very clearly. Funds that belong to someone else, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have occasion to review these records and determine whether there was a cushion amount of money in these accounts?
I was not able to determine that.
Okay. So you don't know if there was money over and above what would have been in the account. Is that correct? Okay. Now, in reviewing these records, all of those records were submitted to you by the investigator that went to the location, business address. Is that correct?
They were given to me by Caitlin Maxwell.
Okay. And it is your understanding that Mr. Forrester actually provided those documents. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware, or do you know, and if not, just let me know, are you aware or do you know whether there was any struggle or any problem giving those over, or whether that was freely and given earnestly?
I don't know.
Okay. Now, you said several times that there were transfers to the general account. Is that correct? Okay. Now, when there's a transfer to the general account, is that immediately a flag for you?
Yes.
Okay. So any transfer from an escrow account to a general account is a flag for you?
Yes.
Okay. Is there ever a circumstance in your mind's eye where that is permissible?
If it was deposited into the wrong account originally, but normally in a escrow account, you take the check given to you when you put a contract out and you deposit it into the escrow account. And then at closing is when you will disperse that check to the title company.
Okay. Are you aware of any time when, let's take your example, for instance, of an earnest money check. Let's say an earnest money check for $2,000 comes in. And the closing, the title company has that applied to the real estate commissions. Would that then be a permissible transfer to the general funds?
No, it would need to go into escrow.
If it originally started in escrow,
Okay.
the closing happened,
Yes.
is that then a permissible transfer?
It would need, wouldn't it go out to the title company?
Your Honor, I'd like to object for the exact same reason that Mr. Forrester just objected, going towards relevance. If the pattern of Mr. Forrester's own accounts is not relevant, I don't see how these hypotheticals could possibly be relevant to the Commission's decision of Mr. Forrester's accounts.
If I may. Your Honor, quite plainly, if the auditing or the audit that was done that is the basis of these allegations doesn't know of a time when a transfer to a general account is actually permissible, then that would knock out certain charges that they've made in their notice of charges and hearing. And if she doesn't know when that actually can happen or could occur, then there's some deficiencies in the pleading, and that's Mr. Forrester's right to defend that to the fullest extent.
Your Honor, Ms. John Finn has not been proffered as an expert witness. She has been proffered as a fact witness. Her ability to describe what is listed on the documentation provided by Mr. Forrester is not up for debate.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
I would only state, to the extent Ms. John Finn has not been tendered an expert, I will concede that she's not an expert, but to that extent, I would also like to put on the record that being that she's not an expert witness, her opinion is not relevant as to anything in this hearing.
And I agree with that. It sounds to me like the witness is offering her opinion and offered it on direct. So I think Mr. Collins' line of questioning is relevant. I mean, it sounds like to me he's trying to decide or determine whether or not, I guess, how qualified your witness is to testify about these deposits, these transactions, whether they were fraudulent, whether they were not. It seems relevant to me, so I'm going to overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. John Finn, I asked you a question about in our closing scenario, and then you responded with a question. I understand that's natural, but just so because we're in a hearing and you're on cross-examination, can't necessarily ask me questions, but is this your first time to testify?
Yes.
Okay, so no harm, no foul. We'll move on. In reviewing these documentation and these records, you never spoke with Mr. Forster, is that correct? You only saw these voluminous documents that have been presented before you, is that
Yes.
correct? Now, we've got stacks of documents that have lots of tabs on them. And it appears that one is an Excel spreadsheet, or several are Excel spreadsheets, is that correct?
It appears to be, yes.
Okay. And then there also appear to be bank statements, is that correct?
Yes.
And is it your understanding that the Excel spreadsheets were internal documentation?
Yes.
Okay, and the bank statements speak for themselves, correct? So any discrepancies would have been done on the Excel spreadsheet, is that what you're saying?
Hard to say.
You don't know who compiled the Excel spreadsheets, is that correct?
No.
Okay. Furthermore, do you know who made these transfers?
According to a few of the bank statements, it said it was transferred by Jay Shane.
Jay,
It said Jay Shane Forrester on, or it says per Jonathan. It says something different on a few. If you look at December 2017, on December 6th, it says per Jonathan by phone.
okay. So, and I'm just looking at the notice of hearing and charges. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The notice of hearing and charges alleged 29 separate transfers. Do you know how many of those were completed or done by Mr. Forster?
No.
Okay. Did you make any inquiry into whether those transfers were made by Mr. Forster? Okay. Are you aware of anybody at your office who made inquiry as to whether Mr. Forster made those transfers? Okay. I gotta have 1 second here.
Redirect.
Ms. John Finn, could you just tell us a little bit more about your background and experience as an auditor?
Yes. So I've worked with Trek for the last few months, since September. But prior to that, I was a auditor for the Department of Revenue of different records. So it's not always Trek related or real estate related, but as an auditor in general.
Could you even guess how many audits you have done over the course of your career?
I can't think of how many, but it's quite a few.
Have you ever had any complaints from an employer, from anyone that has ever worked with you or had to examine any of your audits or reports?
No.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that you said you got a bachelor's in accounting, is that right? Did you
Yes.
have any other education?
Yes, I have a master's in a concentration in accounting.
Okay. And when did you receive that?
I graduated in 2012, May 2012.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Finn. John Finn.
Recross based on that.
Just very briefly, Ms. John Finn, you clearly have a strong accounting background. Would you agree with that statement? Okay. Do you have any specialized training as it relates to real estate?
Say specialized, do I have a real estate license or have I been to a...
Not specifically as to whether you have a real estate license, but specifically, have you been giving any formal training or training while you've been on the staff at Trek as it relates to the accounting of real estate transactions?
Yes, when I started, I was given the rules and regulations and walked through the process, and also able to review prior audits from the prior auditor.
Okay.
That was my extent of training.
They never walked you through a real estate transaction or made you do any on-site learning or anything like that in the field, is that correct?
No.
No further questions.
All right. Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Board members, questions for this witness?
Mr. McMullen.
Morning, Ms. John Finn. I'm Austin McMullen. I'm a member of the Real Estate Commission. We have a document with a lot of tabs on it that's been marked as Exhibit 2, and you reviewed that as part of your audit. Is that right? Okay. Did you review any other documents as part of your audit?
Those were the documents. There were other contracts in there, but I didn't go into extent because it was hard to trace those contracts to the rest of the records.
Okay. Other than Exhibit 2 and those contracts, were there any other documents that you reviewed as part of your audit? Was there any questioning of any person that you did as part of your audit? Okay, so you looked at these documents that are Exhibit 2 and you looked at the contracts. That was it?
Right.
Okay, so based on your review of those documents, what conclusions did you reach as an auditor?
So based on the law of what is considered commingling, transferring from the escrow to the general funds, so when I looked at the transfers, I also took a look at their bank statements. They're in here for the general funds just to see if there were any, escrow checks or anything relating to closings. And I was only able to pinpoint one that was actually related to a closing.
So there are a number of transactions or transfers and withdrawals that you've told us about this morning. And just to be clear, you're saying that of all those different transfers and withdrawals, there was only one closing that appeared to actually be related to a real estate transaction?
Yes.
Okay. Were there any other conclusions that you reached as an auditor after reviewing all of these documents that we've talked about?
Other thing that I noticed is based off the amount that they transferred to their general funds account, that if they did not transfer that amount, it possibly would have resulted in a negative balance. And I did that by comparing the amount of transfers and the amount of debits and credits that they had relating to their bank account.
I would respectfully move to strike that comment as it calls for speculation.
All right. Any response?
I mean, I would argue that it does not call for speculation. It was Commissioner McMullen's question regarding Ms. John Finn's work as an auditor. I mean, she is a fact witness. Commissioner McMullen asked for her observations.
I certainly agree with the question and who asked the question. The portion that I would like stricken from the record is when she said it appears it could have been or there could have been. That is, in and of itself, pure speculation and should not be a part of this record.
Your Honor, Ms. John Finn is qualified to do math as an accountant.
Well, you've already said that she's not an expert, correct? And she's speculating, offering her opinion as what it appears to me as an expert.
I would argue that she is not offering an opinion. She is doing math to come to a conclusion about the numbers.
I'm going to grant that's the objection's upheld. We'll strike the portion that Mr. Collins asked to be stricken. The very statement itself is speculation. She is speculating with that answer.
Okay, Your Honor.
Math is 2 plus 2. It's not offering a theory. All right. Any other questions?
Mr. Wood.
I had a question. I'm trying to make sure how many accounts are we talking about here? And I'm assuming there's a escrow account, and then I see here a commissions account, and then we've mentioned a general fund account. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Your Honor, could I ask a couple of additional questions?
Yes, sir.
Ms. John Finn, do you have this Exhibit 2 in front of you? The big document with all the tabs on it? The page that has a, let me ask you another question first. We'll get to that. You indicated that on August the 21st of 2017, there was a $2,500 transfer from the escrow account to the general business account of the firm. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, on Exhibit 2, the blue tabbed page that says August 2017, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. If you flip to the next page, at the bottom of that page, what looks like an Excel spreadsheet, and at the top it says General Funds 2017, there are transactions that have a date of August the 21st, 2017. Do you see that?
Yes.
So the first transaction was a deposit of $2,500. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if you go across on that line, it shows a resulting balance in the account of $3,085.98. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, also on that date, there was a withdrawal of $1. Is that right?
Yes.
And another withdrawal of $1. Is that right?
Yes.
And there was a payment to Murphy USA of $10.73. Is that right?
Yes.
And there was a payment to Shell of $34.92. Is that right?
Yes.
And there was a payment to the Microsoft store of $76.81. Is that right? And there was a payment to Harbor Freight of $167.92. Is that right? And there was a payment to Jonathan Forrester of $413.95. Is that right? And there was a payment to Jonathan Forrester of $619.95. Is that right?
Yes.
And there was a payment to Jonathan Forrester of $205.99. Is that right?
Yes.
And there was a payment to Jonathan Forrester of $320. Is that right?
Yes.
And there was a payment to Jonathan Forrester of $465.99. Is that right? And all of those came out of that account, according to this, on August the 21st, 2017. Is that right? And after all of those withdrawals, that left a balance in the account of $767.72. Is that right? Now, but for the deposit of $2,500 that was credited on August the 21st of 2017, on that date, would there have been a negative balance in the general business funds account?
Meaning if it was not transferred?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. All the questions I have, Your Honor.
Well, anyone else? Ms. John Finn, so since you've been with the Department of Commerce and Insurance, how many audits have you participated in generally speaking?
I would say at least 10 to 15.
In a typical situation, I'm going to talk about the escrow account for a second.
Right.
What goes into the escrow account typically? What type of deposits?
Earnest money deposits when someone puts in a contract. Normally in the contract it will say this trust money is due within a number of days at the time of execution of contract.
So did your office or did you have any issues with deposits going into the escrow account or deposits going into, say, the general fund account instead of the escrow account?
No.
So it was only money coming out of the escrow account?
Right.
And typically, money coming out of the escrow account, where does it go?
Out of the escrow account, either if it does not close, it goes back to the person that paid it, or if there is a closing, normally the company will write a check to the title company.
So what about commissions that an agent might have earned? Could money come out of the escrow account and go to a commission account?
From my understanding of how it works, I may be incorrect, but the commissions is normally paid by the title company. So the escrow amount is normally transferred. Well, I guess you write a check, the agency writes a check, and then they give it to the title company, and then they handle the commissions.
So from your experience, is it atypical that money from an escrow account would transfer to a general account?
No,
That's not typical.
it's not typical, but I could see reasons it would transfer to the commissions, but I only saw one instance in this case that it was transferred to commission.
So it's your testimony that at least 29 times, money was transferred from an escrow account to the general operating account.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Franks.
Are you aware that when there's a closing, that, let me just give you a scenario. So I have $1,000 earnest money in my earnest money account, and my agent's commission check that will be written to my company is a certain amount less the $1,000 that's in my escrow account, and then I, as the principal broker, can write it from the escrow account into my operating or general account because it's $1,000 less that the attorneys have written me a check for. Are you aware of that? Okay, just want to be clear about that. Okay.
Other questions? Mr. Wood.
I guess I'm trying to understand the three accounts. So there was one account that was being used for escrow money, or earnest money,
Yes.
and then, but what goes in the commission's account and what comes out commission's account? Are you seeing that? Do most brokers have three different accounts?
Normally, I do not. I normally see there's a general account, like we see here, and a escrow account.
Okay.
I normally don't see a commissions account. In my experience as an auditor with Trek, I hardly ever see a third account that
Okay.
they handle their commissions from.
I'm fine. I just want to make sure I wasn't
Yeah.
doing something wrong.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Your Honor, I think those are our questions.
All right. Let's see, may Ms. John Finn be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, do we anticipate recalling her?
No, Your Honor.
All right, then you can step down and be excused or stay in the audience. It's up to you. All right. Very well. Ms. Bridges, do you want to call your next witness?
Yes, at this time, I'd like to call Mr. Forrester to testify.
All right. Morning. Would you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Forrester. Thank you for being here today.
Good morning.
Your Honor, may I approach with the exhibit that's already been entered?
Yes, ma'am, of course.
Mr. Forrester, are those the records that you provided pursuant to the state's audit request?
I haven't went through them all, but they appear to be.
Okay, and did you create those what appear to be spreadsheets?
I did not.
Okay, do you know who did? Okay.
My
And-
wife.
Sorry, could you go ahead? Sorry, I was speaking over you.
And we also had an auditor for a local company that came in and helped us recreate these because the spreadsheets that were on file when we let my administrative assistant go were not correct. We had to rebuild these.
Okay, and just to confirm, were you the principal broker for the Brokers Realty and Auction between the months of January 2017 and May 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and if we look at these Excel sheets, the ledgers, a few times the word error appeared next to the transaction. I know you said you did not prepare these yourself, but could you explain a little bit what those errors are?
Do we need to go through this all day? I mean, do you want to go through it line by line?
If you could just start with the general sense of how did those errors occur? Could you just explain any of them? We can start with, I believe
Well, the bank has made a few errors. They placed funds in the wrong account when we went to the counter, and we had to move those funds to the correct account, so we accounted for that. Ms. Christ actually handled 95% of the checks, the incoming and the outgoing funds from all accounts during this time frame.
Was Ms. Christ a signatory on the firm's accounts?
She is, and we have the signatory pages right here if you need to see them.
Okay. Now, you just said that you were the principal broker.
Yes, ma'am.
Was Ms. Christ in charge of the maintenance of the escrow and general funds account?
She was delegated. I have full responsibility of all accounts, and I knew that. I trusted her. I tried to watch it as close as I can, watch it much closer now. And but she was delegated to be over those accounts. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Going back to a statement that you had just made, you said that sometimes those errors were actually caused by the bank. When did you first notice that the bank had made an error, had somehow deposited the money into the wrong account?
It just depends on what time it happened. Can you give me an example?
We can forget that question. Let me ask you this. How long did it take for you to switch banks after you first noticed that they were depositing funds into the wrong account?
I did not switch banks.
Okay.
This is the same bank.
Okay. As the principal broker, why did you choose to continue banking with a bank that allegedly was depositing funds into the wrong accounts?
I think it's a good bank.
Even though they allegedly caused all these errors, or caused some errors?
Well, Ms. Christ made 95 to 98% of the deposits. So I wasn't present when, those deposits were made some of the times.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Mr. Forrester, can you tell me a little bit about Ms. Christ? When did she become employed by you?
Well, she worked for me for almost exactly 3 years.
Roughly when did she start working for you?
I believe it was 2014. I don't remember the exact date. I have the paperwork there from
2014. Was she, when she initially was hired by you, was she in charge of accounts at that time?
She accepted deposits, took them to the bank, deposited them. She was a signature the entire time, but she was not in charge of the accounting at that time.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
When she was. Yes.
When did she become in charge of accounting?
In August of 2008, I believe, 2018.
Some allegations here, and you've provided records going back to August of 2017.
Yeah, it was August 2017. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Okay. So, in August of 2017, you've seen a copy of the notice and hearing of charges, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you've also completed an answer which you read over to those charges and complaints, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, the real question that the commission, I suspect, has is why you would let someone do this who was making so many errors and that kind of thing, and why you weren't watching closer over these accounts. And quite frankly, Mr. Forrester, that's the whole reason we're here. So what is your response to that?
Well, she had worked there for a few years. She had been part of the spreadsheets. My wife actually handled all the funds, and they would go back and forth. They shared a spreadsheet, if you will. And
and I know you're
my wife and Miss Christ.
Okay. Pronouns are bad for records.
Okay. And my wife has a background. She has in business, and she did a very good job. But I had no reason not to trust her, not to.
Her being Miss Christ?
Miss Christ. I had no reason not to trust Miss Christ. I had no reason to think that anything would go awry. If you look at the accounting before August and after she was let go, you will see no transfers of any kind, no electronic transfers of any kind, nothing out of order. So this happened during a short period of time. I'm not minimizing this by any means, but there's a definite start and a definite end to these types of transfers.
You mentioned online transfers. Did Ms. Christ have access to your online accounting or banking?
Yes, she did.
Okay. Mr. McMullen specifically asked the auditor about some transactions in August. Specifically, I believe it was in August of 2017. And do you have the exhibits up there with you?
I do not, but I remember two of those.
Well, specifically, there was a deposit of $2,500 and then several withdrawals, individual withdrawals on the same day. Can you explain that for us?
I would have to go back and look at it, to be honest with you. And
basic question is this. There are several times where money was deposited and then several transactions happened thereafter. And there was the suggestion that that would have made your general funds account go negative. So my question to you is,
I'm not sure that's accurate, because the commissions account, I think Mr. Wood has asked several times what these three accounts are, and the commissions account is actually a general funds account. So if there are funds in that account, the general funds would not be overdrawn.
Why do you have the three accounts?
Well, because I found it easier to account for the agent commissions, and a lot of those are mine, which go directly into the company. So if I make X amount of dollars, that money goes directly into the company. It's a corporation, so I get a salary. So those funds would actually be company funds if I had the transaction. But if one of my agents, when they have a closing, we deposit that closing check from the title company into that account and into the commissions account. We write a check to general funds, and then we write a check to the agent. And so he gets his part, I get my part. It's easy to look at, and from an audit standpoint, it's cleaner for me.
Okay. In your response to the allegations that's previously been marked as Exhibit 1 to this hearing, you put in your initial statement prior to hiring counsel that you had $9,000 and some odd change was personal funds. Do you recall making that letter or statement?
I do.
Okay. Explain for the commission what that is, what that means, and what you meant by that when you said that. And if you need a copy, I can.
No, I know what those funds were. Those were funds there. I don't know if you've seen several times during this process, they take out $1, they take out this. The bank takes money out of this account. Those funds were in this account, and they, like if we order checks, they take it out of the account that you order it from. But those funds were in there to make sure that anything that the bank took out or anything unforeseen happened, that this account would not be overdrawn.
When you say in there, are you speaking about your escrow
Speaking
account?
about the escrow account, yes, sir.
Okay. So you actually had extra money in the escrow account that wasn't attributable to anyone but the company. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, at some point, you and Ms. Crease had a falling out, and she was terminated from her employ. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And on or when did that occur?
That occurred, I believe it was March 7th, 2018.
2018 or 2019?
2019, yeah, 2019. Yes, sir.
Was this year or was it last year?
It was last year.
Okay, so that would be 18, right?
Yeah, it was 18. It's been 13 months.
Okay.
So
at what point did you realize there had been some accounting errors within the account?
When she stood up and told me that I hope... Well, anyway.
I'm aware of what the conversation
Okay.
said, but let's exclude any.
Well, we had to. I was under suspicion at the time. I was looking at things, and I honestly, the spreadsheets did not match the accounts. And she was in charge of the spreadsheets and the accounts. So what I did was I went to my bookkeeper. I showed her these things. She was not. I don't.
No, let's just clarify this. You know all these people, but the commission doesn't.
Okay,
know who these
okay.
people
Well,
are,
I went
so.
to the person who was doing my taxes at the time. They recommended I hire a CPA. So I hired a CPA. We took him all of our records. He helped us forensically go through it. We found that there was missing funds. Well, not missing, it was transferred. We transferred those funds back into the account as soon as we found out. And we also counseled with CPA. I brought in 2 brokers and counseled with them over my procedures, things of that nature. And I don't allow anyone to manage those funds anymore. I handle those funds. I will not delegate that. Yeah.
So my question for you is, you said you terminated Ms. Christ in March of 2018. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And without getting into the details, well, without getting into the language, did Ms. Christ make any statements to you or anything like that at the termination?
Yeah, she made some derogatory statements.
Did she say any specific statements as to what she was going to do or anything like that?
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor, that's hearsay. I'll move on.
All right.
Mr. Forrester, shortly after your termination of Ms. Christ, did you receive this complaint?
Yes, she filed it the day after she was fired.
Okay. And based on your conversation with her, did you anticipate her filing a complaint? Or were you surprised by the fact that she filed a complaint?
She was a bit erratic. So, no, I didn't expect that at all. But when it happened, I wasn't surprised.
During the time of these transactions, or when Ms. Christ was in charge of the accounting from August of 2017 to March of 2018, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So, did she begin taking care of the accounts at the first or middle of August of 2017? Do you recall?
I recall that it was October 7th. I'm sorry, August. Well, it was mid-August, and the previous person that took care of the accounts sent an email, and her and I sat down and had a conversation to make sure she could handle it. And she assured me, she'd been working with the person that did it for 2 years before her, so I had no reason to think she couldn't handle it at the time.
So, would it be fair to say that Ms. Christ was only in charge of the accounts for roughly 8 months?
That's correct.
When did you begin to suspect that there would be, I believe you stated, irregularities or not right or something like that?
Around mid to late October of the previous year that she was fired, of 17.
Okay, so when did you finally confront her about it?
Well, when I got a phone call from a few people while I was on vacation the week before she was let go, and I started getting 8, 10, 12 phone calls, not only from people that worked for me, but also a vice president of a bank. She was in the bank acting erratically. She was calling, making just really crazy stuff. And I confronted her about it that day. She would not talk to me about it, and I said, look, if you can't explain what's going on here, we need to part ways.
Mr. Mr. Forster, I've gone through most of the questions that I have for you, but this is your hearing, this is your time before the commission. Is there anything you want to say to the commission to let them know what your feelings are on this situation, or what you want them to know, or anything that we haven't addressed that you want them to know about?
Well, I'd just like to thank the commission for having enough faith in us to let us operate the last 13 months, as a broker and run. And I want to tell the commission that I absolutely love what I do. I have the utmost respect for what I do. I have the utmost respect for anyone that I have a transaction with. And I think if you went back and you talked to 99 of 100 people, they would tell you the same thing. I did not mean for the allegations that happened to happen. I think I lost focus and trusted someone more than I should have, and I learned a very valuable lesson. The last year and a half, 13 months, I really beat myself up about this. I'm a very, very proud person. I work with a lot of very proud people. I work with people that work hard every day, and they do not deserve for me to make a misstep. I'm in charge of them, and I can assure this commission, I can assure anyone that I ever work with again, I'm not going to lose focus again. This will not happen again on my watch. Now, I may be in here for something that somebody else did that I wasn't aware of, but you will never see me in front of you again for anything that pertains to this. That's a promise.
One more question.
Redirect?
Redirect.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a few quick questions, Mr. Forster. Are you currently the principal broker for Brokers Realty and Auction?
No, ma'am.
Okay, you had mentioned that are you currently overseeing the funds, the accounts?
I own the company. I oversee everything.
Okay, as the owner of the firm, you're monitoring the accounts.
Yes, ma'am. I'm working very closely with I put the principal broker in place because of these allegations. I don't know, what the commission is going to decide. I need to protect my agents. I need to protect anyone that has any interaction with my company. So I put David Sanders in charge of the company. While this was going on, I thought it was my duty to do that, to protect them.
Okay, and up until Mr. Sanders taking over as principal broker, how long were you a principal broker, and then how long were you the principal broker for your firm?
I was the principal broker of my firm from 2014 to this last, it was either December or January when we placed him. I forgot when they got on roll. But before that, I was the principal broker of TCI Group, which is a local commercial company, for almost 5 years.
Okay.
As well. And if you don't mind me saying, neither myself, you see all these people, you got the list of all the people I've supervised. Neither myself nor anyone under me during my entire tenure as a real estate agent has ever had a disciplinary action. Ever. That doesn't happen by accident. I also hold an auctioneer license that I have never had disciplinary action from.
In all of those years as a principal broker, were you aware of the commission's rules on management of escrow accounts?
I was.
Okay, and were you aware of the rule that states that the principal broker alone is responsible for the management of those accounts?
I am.
Okay, thank you. My last question, you mentioned that the bank made some errors, that Ms. Christ made some errors. Did you make any errors in all of this?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Could you elaborate?
Yes, I placed the wrong person in charge of my finances and still handling on my own at this time.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Board members, questions?
Ms. Taylor.
Yes. May I ask how many you say you have 3 accounts? Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How many signatures were required to write a check on each account?
1 signature. We had 3 signees. We had myself, my wife, and Miss Christ. But Miss Christ made 95% of the signatures.
You let Ms. let's see, you say your wife and Ms. Christ work together on your accounts, is that correct?
Remotely. My wife will very rarely come into the business, but she set up a spreadsheet that they shared via. I'm not very tech savvy, so I think it was through, I don't know, some sort of spreadsheet program. And she could open a computer at home and see what Miss Christ did. Miss Christ could open a computer at work and see what she did. And I could also review those.
So who would you say was the main person in charge of your books then?
Well, until August, mid-August of 2017, it would have been my wife. And from August 2017 till March of 2018, it would be Miss Christ.
But did you say they each had access to the accounts, so each one could look at them at all times?
After mid-August 2017, my wife cut her side off. She had some obligations at work that prevented her from doing that, and that's why Miss Christ took over.
Did you ever see those spreadsheets?
I did.
How often would you look at what was
I would look at them weekly.
Did you ever notice any changes in the way things were done?
I noticed that there weren't as many changes being done. I did notice that.
But if you looked at them at a weekly, on a weekly basis, did it ever occur? Did you ever notice that there were general funds in the earnest money account having issues?
It wasn't being noted. The transfers were not being noted on my spreadsheet.
As long as your wife was and Ms. Christ were working together, did your wife ever notice any discrepancies?
I can't answer for my wife, but I've looked back 2 years on the accounts, and the majority of these, I would say, they could probably give you a little better answer, but I think 20-something of these were electronic transfers, which they went into the bank account, they clicked transfer on the computer instead of writing a check or having some paper document. She just went in and clicked transfer from this account to this account, and off it went. And it wasn't noted in the spreadsheets.
Did you review your bank statements at any time?
About every 3 months, 2 to 3 months, I would, which was too long, honestly. I review them weekly now, but at the time, that's the truth of the matter. I was laxed on it because of the trust I had.
In those times that you did look at the bank accounts, did you notice any discrepancies there?
No, I mainly looked at the balances. I didn't go through and look at the entire spreadsheet when I looked at them.
A bank statement, my bank statement, doesn't have a spreadsheet on it. It just says what the deposits and the withdrawals are on each.
Correct.
And since you have 3 accounts, they would all be
And
different, right?
we had, that was a really busy year for auctions as well. And with auctions, unlike the lady that was sitting here before, unlike auction, we will turn in just for, say it was $13,000. Well, they'll close on that account and they'll pay so much out, and then there might be $2,000 or $3,000 left over that go to pay some sort of a newspaper article that we put out, an advertisement, or something of that nature that would be transferred over and used to do that.
On your earnest money account, on that statement, did you notice money being withdrawn or transferred or?
No, I would have looked at it harder had I noticed it as much. I did not, and like I said, I feel like that's something I need to be looking at every week now, and
When you let Ms. Christ go, you said that was 3/7 of 18, March and 18th, March.
of 18, yes, ma'am. It was
18.
roughly around 13 months ago.
Have you taken any action against Ms. Christ?
I have not, because, and I'll tell you, at first I thought funds were stolen, and then as and I was going to take action, but as we looked at it, it was just transferred, and I couldn't find at any point where she stole any money. And after counsel, to be honest with you, I was really worried about my license. I was really worried about the account. I was worried about making sure everything was whole, making sure that anyone that does business with us was taken care of. That was my focus at first. And then we didn't find anything that was stolen. And to be honest with you, this has been a very expensive process getting from there to here. And, we've just been focusing on this, making sure that everything we do is correct, making sure that we don't make mistakes moving forward. And, and that's what we focused on. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. McMullen.
Good
Yes, sir.
morning, Mr. Forrester. Austin McMullen.
Good morning.
Let me ask you a question about the commission's account.
Yes, sir.
And is that a separate bank account from the general funds bank account?
They do have separate numbers, but they're both general funds accounts. It was just, when we first started our business, we were putting, all the commissions and everything in general funds, and we were paying out commissions out of general funds. And I found, as we were remodeling a location we had, I found it was easier to account for to just take those funds that were going to be commissions and deposit them in a separate account. That way it was cut and dry, what was the companies and what was the agents. And it was treated similar to a escrow account. It goes in, it goes out.
So after you made that decision, in connection with, I think you said remodeling a building or something like that, and you created a separate bank account for the commissions, you still had the original, what we call general business
Funds.
funds
Yes, sir.
account, right?
Yes, sir.
What type of expenses, after you took commissions out of it, what type of expenses would you be paying out of that general business funds account?
Well, we pay our salaries. We pay, of course, any advertising, Pulp Magazine, any type of advertising. We actually, and we pay the gardener. We pay for maintenance on the building. We have a triple net lease on our building, and any maintenance, repairs, things of that nature, we pay that out. And like I said, I'm on a salary, and it's a very modest salary. We pay that salary out, and at times when I have a big closing or what have you, I might pay myself a bonus out of it or things of that nature. But just general things, we don't typically. It has to do with the business if we pay it out of that account.
So if you have a personal expense, do you maintain a separate personal account that you would pay those personal expenses out
Well,
of?
that's what my salary is for. Salary goes in my personal account, and I make those. Now, the company does pay for my realtor dues. They pay for my NETAR dues. They pay for things of that nature that might be construed as personal, but that's a business expense as far as we're concerned. Yeah.
So until August of 2017, your wife was in charge of the books. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. And when she was in charge of the books, did she understand the commingling rules and how the escrow funds were supposed to be treated?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And did you make sure of that?
Well, yes, and just FYI, she has a master's in business.
Okay.
Okay, and a SPHR. She's much more educated than I
Yeah,
am.
she's the smart one of the
Yeah,
bunch.
yeah.
Okay,
She is.
gotcha.
I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for her. Yeah.
I think a lot of us could say that.
Yeah.
And so if the funds started to run during that time your wife was in charge of it, if the funds started to run low in the general funds account, what was she supposed to do to make sure you didn't get
I'm glad you
overdrawn?
addressed that because I wanted to bring that up. We own several pieces of property. We have a lot of equity in property, and we have a line of credit, on some of this property that quite frankly is quite a bit more than this amount that was here. Okay, so it happened twice this winter. When funds get low in general funds, what we will do is we will borrow money from a line of credit, put it in general funds, and then pay ourselves back at a later date out of the corporation. And like I said, that line of credit was in place during this time. Had I gotten a phone call or had I gotten a heads up that we were running low, that we needed it, that's what I would have done. I would have either taken it on my personal account or my line of credit, and I would have placed it in general funds, and then at a later date, I think several of you run a real estate company, that during the winter sometimes it gets a little slow, and those funds will get low, so you take it out of your line of credit, you put it in there, and then in the summer when you're doing well, you pay yourself back. And that's what we have been doing for quite a while. That was our procedure, and I still do it. And like I said, the line of credit that we have dwarfs the amount that was here. There was no need for this to happen whatsoever, and it will never happen again.
So why did you transition from the wife being in charge of the books around August 2017 to the wife and Ms. Christ? Or why was Ms. Christ brought in to handle that aspect as well? What happened?
My wife is a human resource director over a major company in Abingdon, Virginia. They were growing. They had some issues that she needed to tackle, and she needed a little more time. She was going to be at work a little bit later. And honestly, we talked about it, and I didn't think it was fair for her to come home after working 12 hours and then work another 4 hours on our spreadsheets. And we had a conversation with Ms. Christ. She had what she said to be an accounting background, and we had a long discussion about, can you handle this? Are we going to do it the same way? Yes. There was nothing in the discussion that would have discouraged me from putting her in place. And then a few months later, here we are.
So as part of that discussion, conversation that you had with Ms. Christ, did you talk about escrow account and what that
absolutely,
account's supposed to be used for?
At length.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, she understood. She worked for another real estate company before she worked for me, and she understood that those funds, when allocated for closing, they go into the escrow account and they don't move until you have a closing. And at length, and she had been handling everything that came in and everything that went out for 2 years previous. We had multiple discussions about how you handle escrow funds, and those funds are to stay in place until you have a closing or you have a reason to move them.
Did you ever have a conversation with Ms. Christ about funds in the general account being low?
I did, and she was aware of how we handled that. She knew that when it got low, she would call in and she would say, hey, we have $900 payable here. We only have around $600 in there. We need to transfer some money. So I would go and transfer money either from my personal account, or we would take it from, the line of credit and put it in there, and we would keep track of that and pay ourselves back when the fund, when we had several closings.
So when Ms. Christ was in charge of the books during that 8-month period, you're saying that if funds got low, you would be the one to transfer money either from your personal account or from your line of credit?
Or my wife would write a check into the account and dictate loan on the bottom of the check.
So that would have to be either you or your wife?
Correct.
Because Ms. Christ didn't have access to your personal account.
That's correct.
And Ms. Christ didn't have access to the line of credit.
That's correct. And I did think it was funny that we got into December, and I asked her several times, how are we doing? Do we need anything? No, we're fine. You know, we're okay. That was the answer I got.
So would you get the bank account statements on the escrow account? Would those come to you?
The bank account statements came in the mail, and she filed them when they came in.
Did you look at the bank account statements on the escrow account?
I did, not as often as I should have during that period.
Okay. There was was there a trip that somebody took to Las Vegas in November of 2017?
No, it was Lake Tahoe. I believe it was. No, I don't know. I may have. I don't remember.
If there were funds spent out of your business account in November of 2017 in California and in Las Vegas, would you know anything about that?
Yes, I would. And I did go to California and in 2017.
What was the purpose of that trip?
It was just my wife and I went to Temecula, to wine country.
On a vacation?
Yes.
Okay. And did you pay expenses of that trip out of the business account?
I don't remember, but if I did, it would be marked as wages when I came back. You know, if say I'm somewhere and I was running low or what have you, if I did spend money out of general funds, whenever we came back, it would be earmarked as wages. I own all accounts, so, you know, but I'm not going to use those funds for personal expenses. No, you know.
August of 2017, there was auditor testified that there was $2,000, or there were two $2,000 withdrawals, or maybe one was $2,200. Do you know what those were for out of the escrow account?
I wrote those. We had $90-something hundred of personal funds in the account at the time, and I did write those checks to myself that would have left $50-something hundred in that account, if I'm not mistaken. High 40s or low 50s of personal funds in that account.
So what did you use the approximately $4,200 for that you took out of the escrow account at that time?
Honestly, I don't remember. I think it had something to do with maintenance on the building we were in, but I don't know. I don't remember. It's been a while.
There have been a lot of transactions and transfers that the auditor testified about that are reflected in these documents that are Exhibit 2, and the auditor testified that from what she could tell, there was only one transfer that was in connection with a transaction. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that?
I don't know, honestly. I know I didn't authorize those transfers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, these records that we have here are voluminous, but I'm just wondering, I'm not an auctioneer, I'm a real estate agent.
Sure.
So as a real estate agent, I know what an escrow account is used for. Are there other purposes that an escrow account could be used for as an auctioneer?
Absolutely.
Okay, could you elaborate?
Well, when we hold an auction, we collect funds, both personal. Sometimes it depends on the auction. If we have a real estate auction, we only collect escrow funds for real estate purposes. If we have a personal property auction along with a property auction, real estate property, real property, we may collect X amount of dollars that is personal property. All those funds go into that account. Now, per our agreement, typically, almost all of our when you sign a contract, you state that we will pay for advertising, which is typically $2,000 to $10,000, what have you. You know, we pay for ring men. We might have to put up porta potties. We might have to put up tents, what have you. You know what I mean? But all those expenses, it's agreed upon that those expenses plus a commission will go to the real estate company after the sale of that property. And we may, transfer some of those funds because we have to pay, if it were the Nashville Press or what have you, we have to pay those bills that we've incurred during the auction or any expenses. So we would transfer that and pay those bills.
So you have one escrow account for your real estate activity and one escrow account for auction activity. This is the same account we're talking about.
Same account.
Just the one account. Okay. Let's talk about Ms. Kreis for a little bit. Do you have any idea? Could you even speculate as to why she would make these transfers?
I know she was very bitter. I don't know. I don't know. Look, I'm not here to beat her up. I'm here to answer for why this happened. I have heard speculation, but through other people, that she was very, dissatisfied with her job, dissatisfied with the way I handled things, dissatisfied with various things. I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that. She's not here to defend herself, but
I would say, so to your knowledge, none of the funds that were transferred between the accounts ended up in Ms. Kreis's hands. She didn't take
no.
any.
Had it, I would have prosecuted.
Is there anybody else at your company or your firm that could direct Ms. Kreis to make these transfers?
No, absolutely not.
So it's just you, your wife, and
and
her.
And my wife was out of the picture during this period. Okay. So it was myself and her. And we have a list of the signatories over there. And if we if we had a list of checks here, her signature would be on almost all of them. Yeah. No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Ms. Franks.
Hello, Mr. Forrester.
So.
So are you doing commercial also, or?
Yes, I primarily focus on commercial real estate myself. I have some people that do. Well, we have several auctioneers. I'm an auctioneer as well. I'm the principal auctioneer. And then we have a handful that do residential, but all I focus on personally is commercial.
And do you do any property management?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
We did for a short period of time, but it wasn't my cup of tea.
Okay. And so you're thinking on the escrow account of having one escrow account for it's all one company then, real estate and auctioning.
That's correct, and it's in the name, the Brokers Realty and Auction, Inc.
So you obviously do online banking. So do you have one of the little machines that you put the check in and it goes straight to the bank and
No,
that's
ma'am.
where you deposit?
No, ma'am. We take them to the bank.
You hand deliver them to the bank?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so did Miss Kreis, did she also do those deposits for you?
Yeah, while she was there, she made almost all of them.
And so the only people who had signing privileges were you, your wife, and Miss Kreis?
That's correct.
And how do you know Miss Kreis? How did you know about her?
When I started my business in 2014, when I left TCI Group and started my own company, the first person that I hired as an agent referred her. It should have been a red flag. She had just gotten fired from another real estate company, but he vouched for her. She was a nice lady. We interviewed her. She seemed like a very nice person, and so we hired her.
And what was her background?
Well, she said she had an accounting background, and she did most of the accounting for the real estate company that she had came from.
So she went to college and got a degree in accounting?
No, she didn't have a degree in accounting.
So was she a bookkeeper?
She was a bookkeeper, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long did Ms. Kreis work for you when you decided to put her on as a signature on your accounts?
She was with us for a little over 2 years.
So she wasn't a signature until...
Oh, no, she was a signature from, I think it was a month after I hired her. She was put on as signature. We have this. I have a folder here that has that.
Did she ask to be put on as a signature?
No, I asked her to.
Okay.
That was my decision.
Okay, so...
She didn't take offense to it at all, you know.
Okay, so... So you mentioned something about owner funds. What exactly are owner funds?
Well, we were, and let me also say, while this was being written, I hired an attorney before I hired Mr. Collins. I counseled with her once, and I was supposed to get help. I was not aware of it, but she actually got cancer and died a few months later. So I was kind of in limbo trying to do this on my own. I really wanted counsel when I wrote this, so I may have worded that in a way that. But owner funds, basically, it means that if you keep X amount of dollars in that account, besides money you're holding for other people, it was there for miscellaneous things like if we purchased checks or if the bank had a fee or something of that nature to make sure it was covered.
And why would the bank have a fee on an escrow account?
Well, if you order checks,
but not a bank fee.
No, it was a not. I will not have an interest-bearing account. It was a non-interest-bearing account. That's too much to keep up with, you know, all that. But it was a non-interest-bearing account. But well, if you look through there, I was looking through there a few minutes ago. You see a dollar here, a dollar there. They might charge you to. There are a lot of companies in our area that will not take a company check. They want you to have a cashier's check. So when you go have a cashier's check taken out, they actually withdraw the money, and they make the cashier's check, which is kind of hard to keep up with. You know, sometimes because they just withdraw it, make you a cashier's check, and then they take a fee out of your account.
Okay.
For that.
I noticed there was another, I think it was a man's name in here that had made and maybe it was in the later documents, that had made a transfer. Was there ever anyone else other than you or Ms. Christ in these documents that you know of? I thought I saw a man's name and made a...
There shouldn't be.
Okay, maybe I didn't see it right then. But
the only transfer that would go into that account would be if we were accepting earnest money, say someone was out of state, then they would electronically transfer it into the account, but there shouldn't be anything going out.
So could Ms. Christ pick up the phone and transfer it by phone? Because I saw some phone
Absolutely.
entries.
She did it quite often.
And so why would she do it by phone versus doing it electronically?
I wish she was here to answer that. I don't know.
Okay, and so obviously you had given her authority and you knew that she was doing these transfers. Because if you weren't doing them...
It was... So this didn't happen for 3 years. This happened for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months or what have you. And during that time, we were very busy. That's no excuse. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying we were busy. I'm telling you the truth. We were busy. I trusted her. I didn't look at it as close as I should have. And I wish I had paid closer attention. I look at it like a hawk every week now because I know the implications of not looking at it like a hawk.
So your testimony is that you trusted this woman, and after 3 years, she basically could make transfers. She just took care of it.
That's correct.
Okay. But she doesn't have a real estate license.
No, she is not a licensed realtor.
Okay. Have there been any criminal charges against you for this commingling of funds?
I've never had a misdemeanor at any point in my life.
So there's no investigation going on or of any sort about
Not that I'm aware of.
commingling of these funds?
No.
So you've said several times that you lost your focus. Did you lose your focus because you had a lot of business going on?
Oh, I think I did. Not just that. You can get complacent, and that's a mistake. I think I was more complacent than lost focus. I had trust there, so I didn't go there and watch it like a hawk like I should have. I got complacent. I trusted who was around me, and I'd never. When I worked for TCI Group, all the funds were taken care of for me, pretty much. A gentleman owned it, and I worked for him, and he took care of those things. When I started my own, as we're an affiliate. We take an array of tests. They tell us what to do. We know what to do. We affirm we know what to do. But without live, real experience, it's hard to tackle everything that comes your way without making a mistake every now and then. And, guys, I lost focus. I made a mistake, and I learned from it. And I am very focused now, and I always will focus on this subject very firmly.
Is it your testimony then that you take full responsibility for what happened?
Yes, ma'am.
And could you explain to me, as a principal broker, knowing the law as you do, can you explain to the commissioners why you think it is that, even though you broke the law, why we should give you, why we should not go by the law and set that aside for you?
Well, there was no intent at any point. None. The funds were available. It's more of, the way I look at it, it was more of an accounting error or oversight error. There was not intent. If there were intent, less than a month after this happened, I deposited $100 and something thousand in my account. After she was let go, there have been no errors. Before she was let go, there were no errors like this. If there was intent, my goodness, when I had a couple $100,000 in my account, something would have happened. I would never purposely do this. And I feel like I really care about what I do. I feel like I care about the people around me. I feel like I care about the consumers. I care about your position. If I were in your position, I would be asking the same questions. I respect that, but I have never. I made an error, not on purpose. And moving forward, if you have seen how hard I've worked, the sleepless nights, the people I've brought into counsel, the CPAs, the other brokers, I have completely, not just from the escrow standpoint, I have looked at my business from the most minute detail down to escrow. And I've made changes, and I've refocused, and I have a better understanding. I'm a much better broker today than I was a year and a half ago, by far. And I will not lose focus again.
Can I ask you, do you have a company credit card? Because I see in lots of places, lots of things that have nothing to do with your business. Like McDonald's, like all kinds of restaurants.
I may meet someone there and have a meeting. I may go to a nice restaurant, may go to McDonald's.
Are you the only one with a credit card, or did Ms. Christ have a credit card also?
At the time, she had access to use a credit card, one of mine. Yes.
And how many agents do you have?
We have 15 agents right now.
And they're all full-time?
All but 2, I believe, are full-time.
Good. Any questions?
Yes. I was looking on the general fund, and this is really kind of going along with what Marcia was just talking about. I noticed in the general fund, on the ledger part, there's a lot of entries, but not a lot of check numbers. And I think she's kind of talking about maybe, is it a credit card or is it like a debit card maybe that's being
Are you
used?
talking about the bank ledger, or are you
No.
talking about the?
I'm going to say the ledger that for the general fund on the spreadsheet.
The
that's
spreadsheets.
done, yes.
Okay. I didn't make these spreadsheets.
Okay.
I had help with them.
Okay.
You know.
Well, and as I try to match it to the actual statement that comes through, is there like a debit card or something that's being used for a lot of this maybe?
Yes, like I have a company car that the
Okay.
company owns, so
Okay.
I'll get gas, and if I met someone out either at a decent restaurant or what have you, you know, I typically try to buy dinner, especially for higher end clients. You know, I want their business.
Oh, I'm not trying to challenge the
Right,
validity of the
right.
charges. I'm good with that. I completely understand. I would just like, and I look at the general fund, there was not a lot of check numbers, but there was a lot of entries, but not a lot of check numbers, and I think the matching is coming to the debit card that's being used is what I think it is.
Well, I travel a lot.
That's fine.
I travel a lot, and we get gas a lot. And for multiple vehicles, I also have a van that puts up signs for me. I supply fuel for it. We fix it. We have a building that we have triple net lease, and we do maintenance and repair there as well. You know.
Let me ask, how are in closings in your area done? And as I travel, they're done a little bit different parts of the state. But let's say when you go to closing, let's say you're holding $1,000 earnest money. Do you take it or give it to the title company or closing people, or does it stay in your account until closing?
We write a check, and the agent takes it to the closing.
Okay.
And then the closing agent,
Then they'll give you a check for your full commission.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Typically, if it's not an auction, that's the way it works. But even at real estate auctions, it works that way as well.
Okay. And different parts of the state. If we were having this discussion in Middle Tennessee, it's done very differently.
Okay.
Truthfully, I think you're doing it right. I mean, that part's
okay.
right. That your part of the state's doing it, but
Thank you.
Middle Tennessee, we do it different because to get a check cut and take it to closing requires pre-planning, and so and people being organized. How about on your check statements? When you get your statements from the bank each month, does your bank provide the images of the checks?
They do not.
Okay.
It's a line item. We can go in and request copies of the checks, and typically they come out, 15, 20 of them on one page or what have you,
That sure would have been helpful.
It would have, yes.
I mean, it would kind of, because when we're just getting I guess a ledger like this and then the statement, you really can't.
Keep in mind that in a matter of 10, 15 days, we put this together, okay? After she was let go and things of that nature. We were working. I lost my attorney, at the same time, and we hired the CPA, and he went through, and we were focused on matching numbers, making sure that everything that had went out had been put back in. That was our focus at the time. And when we made these ledgers, it was about making sure the accounting was correct. And had we spent a little more time on it, we could have probably done that. But,
And you mentioned a couple times, or it's a couple times it's been mentioned that maybe there needs to be extra money in the escrow account to cover like expenses like checks and stuff.
Correct.
Just kind of as a ballpark, how often do you think you're ordering checks out of that account? Or for that account?
2 or 3 times a year.
Okay.
Yeah. When we first started the business, it might last a year, A second, third year, twice a year. Now we're up to the point where we're having multiple closings every week. So it goes.
Okay, Ms. Taylor.
I have one more question. Well, I might have more than one, but I want you to go back over. You said, explain to me the auction, what you did with that money from the auctions.
Well, it depends on the auction, okay?
Right.
If it's purely a real estate auction, it acts almost identically to a real estate transaction. The only difference is that you have a real estate auction contract versus a purchase and sale agreement. And then when you sell the property, you will fill out a purchase and sale agreement with the buyer and seller after the auction is done. Now, if you have personal property along with that auction contract, then you'll have funds that they want before you go to closing. They'll want their part of it, and when you have an auction contract, in that contract it states that these funds out of the auction will be allocated to pay back a percent, like your advertising and your ring men, and if you put up a tent or a porta potty or what have you, whatever the expenses are, they're always different. There's no one auction that's the same as another. You just kind of have to adjust as you do them.
What I think I meant to ask was the auction money. Did I understand that there was some sort of money that was put up front that went into your earnest money account, and you paid certain fees out of that?
Well, we can do an auction two different ways. We can either say, if you'll pay $5,000 up front for auction expenses, then we'll hold your auction, and then here's the commission amount we'll get.
And where is that money?
They can pay for auction expenses up front if they want to. But typically, during an auction scenario, most people don't have the money to do that. So we handle all that for them, and then we pay it after the closing.
Where is that money put? And which of your accounts is that money
Escrow.
put?
That money goes into escrow.
So, but that is not. Is that escrow money then?
Well, it's funds that were allocated from a consumer to me.
But the money is not. I don't understand auctions, and I need to.
Okay.
You put money up front, right? And that's considered.
You can.
Most
people don't, but
you can.
You can.
You can or you can't.
Correct.
But what your money that you put in the earnest money account for auctions is, explain that to me.
Okay. Typically, they don't put money up front. Typically, we call the local. Wherever we advertise, we advertise. And then at the auction, we will collect money for personal items, and then we will collect money for the real estate. All of that goes into escrow, and then it's paid out of escrow. Now, what's paid through an attorney, say you go to a real estate closing, the money that's paid through an attorney, they will get a check at closing. But the money that they have agreed to pay for advertising, and then their part, and then our part, or what have you, all of that goes out to different places. It can go and from escrow.
But do you consider that earnest money? That's what I'm saying. You're putting
Well,
it
we
in the
consider
earnest
it
money
escrow funds. We consider it. I mean, it's not our money. It's their money, and until we allocate it somewhere, according to the contract, it's their money until we allocate it somewhere.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Forrester, let me start with a general question.
Sure.
When did you first learn that Ms. Christ was transferring money out of escrow to the general account?
About a day after I fired her.
All right.
Or let her
and
go.
how did you learn that?
By auditing the funds.
And also,
Or I could tell that it was out of order, and we needed a stronger audit.
Did you not have financial statements for the year ending 2017?
I did, but we filed an extension.
I'm not talking about a tax return, but as a corporation, did you have an accountant that prepares your financial reports?
We did, and we had a bookkeeper that handled it, and then after this happened, I hired a CPA.
All right, so your testimony is Ms. Christ was fired on the 7th. documents show the Real Estate Commission received a complaint on the 8th of March.
Correct.
And the documents that provided notice of hearing and charges says on March 9th, you made an earnest money deposit from the firm's general account amount of $13,059. It was for like a Boones Creek sale.
Yes, I did.
At that point, previously in other documents, it shows that amount of $13,059 was in an escrow account.
That's correct. And that check was written on the 8th, the day after she was let go.
Wouldn't your inclination be to go to get it out of the escrow account?
It was, and that's what triggered the audit.
So it wasn't
The
in
self-audit.
There was no you didn't have $13,059 in the escrow account at that point.
That's correct.
So you had to get it to an attorney for a closing.
That's correct. And I called the bank and I told them to write. I wasn't in town when they wrote that check. I was coming back from vacation. Well,
I guess what I'm confused about is if you know the law and the rule, wouldn't it make more sense to transfer that money from the general account back to escrow and then write the check out of escrow?
I should have, but I had an agent that needed funds, and I wanted to make sure he got it.
It could be done electronically, right? The transfer.
Well, we could have put it in escrow and then written it back out. And I actually asked the bank man, the person who wrote this check, to do it that way. He didn't do it that way, so.
All right. Then 2 weeks later, on the 23rd, this is at the end of this audit, you transfer $37,200 approximately from the general account back to escrow.
Correct.
Now, what does that number represent? Generally speaking, I don't mean specifically.
Okay, I could reference it. There were two transfers back into escrow. There was that amount, and then there was another smaller amount that made it whole. At this time, I was only concerned about getting everything that transferred out of the account back in. And I did not distinguish between my funds, my personal funds that were taking out, and the escrow funds. I just wanted a number to put it back and make it whole. So when we audited it, we came up with X amount of dollars, and we made those two transfers to make the account whole. And then later in I believe it was April, we after we audited it, we transferred $70-something hundred and another amount out that were owner funds to take it down to, so we knew what was in there was earnest funds.
So let me ask about that.
Yes, sir.
April 5th, 2018.
Yes, sir.
Transfer out of escrow of $7,500.
Correct.
Back to general.
That was owner funds. Like I said, when I made those earlier deposits, I wasn't concerned about what was mine and what was earnest. I was concerned with the entire amount that came out. So I transferred my funds and escrow funds back into that account because I didn't know what was whole or not until we forensically went through it and accounted for it.
It is your testimony that you never, in any of these cases, asked Ms. Christ to transfer funds from escrow to
No, I
general.
didn't at any point.
So is it possible, here's Mr. McMullen pointed this out earlier, but we can find other dates where a transfer, maybe one or two transfers was made from escrow to general account, and that same day a number of checks were written, sometimes a majority of those checks to you, that would have caused the general account to be overdrawn if those funds hadn't been transferred. Is it possible she was doing it out of the goodness of her heart to protect you?
She may have, but we should, if she was, then I really wish we would have had a conversation. It could have been fixed early on.
Well, so my last question or two. So you're the principal broker at this
Yes, sir.
time. It's your responsibility to be aware of those accounts. Who signed the checks that, like, when came? Some are electronic, obviously, but like checks to a title company.
She did.
And did she give you a report, or how did you do your job to pay attention to that account?
I was I was fortunate enough to have someone else do it for several years that I trusted, and I didn't watch it close enough during this period of time. And I mean, that's what happened.
Other questions? Ms. Franks?
On the escrow account, there are, on the Excel spreadsheet that you and your wife did, on August 9th, there's one that says to be determined, Clarktown.
August 9th?
Mm-hmm. I just wondered what that meant, to be determined. TBD.
Well, I'm thinking at the time when we made this, we probably didn't have access to a file or something at that point that we accessed later.
So where do you keep your files?
I keep them in the office, about 10 steps from my desk.
So where did you do the Excel spreadsheet from? Was that not done at your office?
These were done either at my home or at the office. Remember, this spreadsheet was shared between Joni and my wife before that, and it was incorrectly, during this 4 or 5 month period of time, it was incorrectly put in. So what I was looking at when this happened, I look at the spreadsheet and I'm like, well, it's there. Then I look at my bank account, it's different. And that's why I had to employ a CPA to come in and forensically go back through the account. And we had to pretty much recreate a spreadsheet.
But it is your job and your responsibility as a principal broker to have done that proactively, not
That's correct.
reactively. On August 18th, I think this spreadsheet, it's a good job doing this spreadsheet. But on August 18th and August 19th, it just says withdrawal. On the others, it says earnest money, closing. I understand what that means.
Are you talking about the general? You are speaking about the general funds?
No, I'm in the escrow account.
Escrow. Okay, I'm sorry.
It just simply says withdrawal, and there one is 2,000, one is 2,200.
No, when Mr. Brick came in, he was the field auditor. When he came in, I went through this with him, and we had 4 files of closings of purchase and sale agreements, and we matched all those up.
Except for these 2 that just say withdrawal?
Everything matched when he left. And then
You provided this, though, right?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay, that's all I have.
Mr. Diaz?
I just want to talk about get a little more clarity about the escrow accounts and how they relate to auctions versus real estate transactions. Is it a common practice in the auctioneer business to have an escrow account, to have those kinds of transactions coming in and out of that account? Is that typical?
Yes.
Okay. So I think you can see the confusion between
I do.
One escrow account for real estate transactions that's also being used for an auction transactions.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I have one quick follow-up question. So you had,
Yes, sir.
your testimony was that you had an accountant come in and forensically check it, and on March 23rd, you transferred $37,240 back to escrow.
Correct.
Subsequent to that, in April, you transferred out back to general $7,600 because
Correct. That was the overage of the amount I put back.
Well, but didn't you put back what the accountant said was the amount that should be in the account? I'm just confused about why.
Well, when I put it was not just the 30-something thousand. There was another deposit. There was 2 deposits that made it whole. Okay, I'm not sure why that one's not showing, but we made 2 deposits, the 30-something thousand and the other on the same day. That made the account whole. Then my CPA went through the account. We found that these funds were the $70-something $100, and I think there was I think it was a total of $90-something $100 that came out. That that other 2,000 is not showing on this either. But I said, look, this is too confusing. Our money and we just took that out, and we provided a spreadsheet that showed everything that we were holding earnest funds for, and the escrow matched everything we were holding funds for at that point.
That was after you took the 75.
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Franks.
Are you, when were you first licensed as a broker?
Well, I was licensed in 2007 as an affiliate, and 3 years later, I received my broker's license.
Okay, so you're not grandfathered. That was what I was trying to
No,
get to
ma'am.
as a broker.
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you. So, are you affiliated with a realtor association?
Northeast Tennessee Association of Realtors.
So you're required every 2 years to take an ethics course?
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I have.
Your Honor, I think we've exhausted our questions up here, and I would plead with the court to allow a 10-minute break where we promise not to talk to each other.
All right. And if, with that promise in mind, we'll take a 10-minute recess. Let's call it, why don't we reconvene at 10 till? That makes it even. Is that okay with the commission? All right, 10 till. Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Forrester. And council's back. Were there any other? I think the board had finished with their questions for Mr. Forrester. So may he step down at this point? All right. Thank you, Mr. Forrester, for your testimony. And at this point, Ms. Bridges, do you want to call? Do you have another witness?
That concludes the state's proof.
Okay. All right. Mr. Collins, you want to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor, please. We have several affidavits that you previously alluded to. I've previously given a copy of this to council, and I have enough copies for all the members. With your permission, may I approach?
Yes, sir. And let me ask, we had the Commerce and Insurance's affidavit that was entered the first. That was our first exhibit, and so these are going to be entered. Does the commission want time to review these now, or does council have an opinion? Would it be better to review before deliberations, or?
I would say in deliberations is fine.
All right.
They're pretty well to the point, and I don't want to belabor the point.
Okay.
For them to.
All right. So we will distribute these now, and then if you would take the time to review those prior to beginning deliberations.
While those are getting passed around, I would call David Sanders.
All right. Mr.
If there is, and I apologize, Your Honor, but if there is no objection, those are 4 affidavits, just for purposes of the record. First affidavit is Edwin Griffith. Second affidavit is Bridget Jermunson. Third one is Perry Youngwall, and a fourth is Jesse Shelton. I would move to enter those as collective exhibit.
3.
3.
Believe it would be 3. Give us just a minute to mark these. Sorry, was it Mr. Sanders?
Yes,
All right,
David W. Sanders.
All right, would you raise your right hand for me, Mr. Sanders? Do you
Yes.
swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right. Yes, sir, Mr. Collins. Thank you.
Sanders, appreciate you being here today. Where do you live?
I live at 24 Hunters Ridge Road in Johnson City, Tennessee.
Okay. And Mr. Sanders, do you know Mr. Forrester?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And why are you here today?
On his behalf.
Okay. And have you known Mr. Mr. Forrester in a capacity as a real estate broker?
Yes.
Have you had real estate dealings with him?
Yes.
Okay. And tell me about, just generally, I don't need you to get into detail about all those in the interest of time, but generally, how have you found Mr. Forster to conduct his business, his company, interactions with you, and the transactions you've dealt with?
I've known him for a period of 11 to 12 years. He is a very hard worker. He takes his career very seriously. He's a very good broker. I'm the broker there now. I wish he was there now because he'll do a better job than I will.
Okay. And how long have you worked with him in the capacity as a real estate broker?
11, 12 years.
Okay.
Oh, as the broker of the company now was just the last.
No, just how long have you known Mr. Forster as a real estate broker? The same 11, 12 years?
Yes, he started out as an affiliate broker and then became a broker. And I knew him through both of those periods.
Mr. Sanders, have you ever known, you know what the nature of the charges are here today, is that correct?
Yes, I've learned it by sitting back there listening to it.
Right. And have you ever known Mr. Forster to be there be any question whatsoever about the handling of funds or client money or anything like that?
No, and again, I've learned it today more than I knew before I came. It's just listening to the testimony in here today, and there's zero signs of any of that.
Your dealings as an affiliate with him or as a principal with him, have you ever had any troubles with your funds or commissions or any other kind of transactions whatsoever?
Zero.
Okay. Do you have any other comments you would like to make to the commission today?
I don't think this would ever happen if you didn't have a disgruntled employee. We wouldn't be here. He would, when he found he had a mistake, he would immediately try to correct it. And I again learned from today. I see that. Jonathan is again an excellent broker. You know, when I was back there listening to all this and realizing the history of this day, how it comes into play, there's no collusion. The Mueller report, I saw a report back there that makes a Mueller report look this thin. I just a little bit of humor, I say. Jonathan is an excellent person, personally, morally, and professionally. And I see no reason at all that he should not be granted his license, his broker's license. And again, he is stronger from going through all this. I am even stronger by just listening to all this. And I see the seriousness of taking care of other people's money. I understand the part about the confusion of auctions. And again, I understand that's other people's money, and that's why it's got to go to an escrow account instead of a company account. It's not our money. You know, previously, before I got here this week, we had a question. A guy took a contract, and he got $500 in cash. That don't happen too often, and we don't encourage that. But what do you do with $500 in cash, and you're getting ready to close down the office that day, and where do you put it? And a deal hasn't come together yet. They're still negotiating, but they give you $500 in cash, and buyer and seller are still negotiating. Well, that's not our money. Do you put it in your wallet? No, you can't put it in your wallet. Do you put it in a file and put it in the file cabinet? What about somebody? Agents have access to that. Somebody can steal that money. Do you run to the bank real quick and put it in the bank? Banks are closed. I said, there's dilemmas in this business that you just don't have an answer to all the time. And I said, first of all, I actually make a Xerox copy of that $100 bills, and I put it in the most safe place you could in the office until the next day that you could do something else with. But there's all times situations in this business that you can't pull up a book up and get an answer. What do I do next? You just do the best you can. And that's what Jonathan's doing. He's just doing the best he can. Yes, he made mistakes. Yes, he became lackadaisical in keeping a close look on things. But he knows more about the business, the company right now, which I'm the broker of, than I know. He can tell you to the penny right now what's in the escrow account. I can't tell you. Yeah. Jonathan deserves to keep his broker's license, and I need to be out of it.
All right, cross-examination?
No cross-examination.
All right, thank you. Any board questions, or excuse me, commission questions?
Prior to you being appointed as the principal broker, were you involved in any of the transactions to the escrow account?
Involved in escrow accounts except getting a commission or something like that? No.
You had no visibility into the account balances?
No, I had no signature.
No signature?
Nothing, and I don't want it.
Okay, so your only interaction with the escrow accounts has been since you were appointed principal broker?
That's right. And Jonathan has been 100% on top of it since I've been the broker. I trust him more with it than I trust myself.
So for the period in question, you had no involvement at
Right.
all with the accounts? Thank you.
So, Mr. Sanders, to follow up on that, are you authorized to sign checks for the company?
No.
Are you authorized to transfer money from one account to another?
No.
Are you responsible and take full liability for those accounts?
Yes, I'm responsible.
So does that go together? I mean, do you
No, it
look at the
don't, does
financial-
it?
It really doesn't.
That's why he needs to be the broker and I don't need to be.
So, we appreciate you coming clearly. However, I mean, according to the respondent's testimony, that he was kind of blindsided by all this stuff. Is it possible that you might be being blindsided by the same type of events that your former principal broker
It's
was?
possible. I do trust him, and I'm putting my trust where my broker's license lies. I'm putting it up on, it's on the chopping block right now. I understand that.
Who does sign checks?
Jonathan is still signing the checks.
It seemed like there might have been testimony that he hired some person to take care of accounting.
Not at this later date. At that period of time that we're looking at, yes, he had a lady, Jonathan, his wife, and Mrs. Price could sign checks. But I do not have any authority to sign any checks, nor do I want it.
You just have the liability.
I have the liability.
Thank you, sir.
I hope he's paying you good.
Oh, yeah. I got a good steak dinner last night.
All right, any commissioners, other questions for Mr. Sanders? I think we're finished, Your Honor.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Sanders, for your testimony. You may step down.
Final witness would be Joe Wilson.
All right, Mr. Wilson. All right, I can officially say good afternoon. How are you?
Fine, sir, and you?
I'm good. Would you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Collins.
Mr. Wilson, if you will, state your name for the record, please.
Joe Wilson,
And where you currently reside?
213 Willows Ridge Court, Johnson City, Tennessee.
How do you know Mr. Forster?
I've known Mr. Forster since 2007. I used to be his principal broker at East Tennessee Land and Auction Company.
And how long was it that you had known him?
Approximately, well, around 2007. A little bit before that, we met each other.
How many real estate transactions have you had with Mr. Forster?
Numerous, hundreds.
Hundreds? And have you ever had any problems with any accounting or monies or funds or anything like that in your
No.
dealings with Mr. Forster?
No, sir.
Do you have an opinion of Mr. Forster as to his character and general trustworthiness and honesty as a person?
Yes, sir. He is very honest. We've worked, like I say, 13, 14 years together. We've never had the first problem. I've never had any negative derogatory comments about Jonathan or his character. It's all been very positive.
Mr. Wilson, that pretty much concludes my general questions. Is there anything else you wanted to say to the commission on behalf of Mr. Forster here today?
Other than Jonathan and I have worked together for many years, I totally trust him. I always have trusted him. We've done many different transactions together. And like David said, sometimes our guard drops. We make mistakes. Hopefully we get them corrected and move on. And I would definitely like to see Jonathan as my principal broker again. I don't have any intentions of going anywhere else. I've been in the business for 40 years, and I wouldn't be there if I didn't believe in Jonathan and the way he has handled business.
No more questions.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination?
That's examination.
Okay. Board questions?
Mr. Diaz.
I'll just ask you the same question as the previous witness. Have you had any authorization, any access to any of the accounts for the period of time that are in question today?
Sir.
You weren't a signatory to the account?
No, sir.
You never authorized to do any transactions?
No, sir.
Okay,
Been
thank
there,
you.
done that. I have no interest in doing it again.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wilson, I appreciate your testimony and your time here. You can step down, I think, if you'd like.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Any other witnesses?
No, sir.
All right. At this point, then, I think we can move to closing statements. Is council ready for closing statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Go right ahead, ma'am.
Commissioners, as you've just heard, over the course of roughly 8 months, while Mr. Forrester was responsible and solely responsible for the maintenance of escrow funds kept by the firm, he allowed those funds to be taken from the escrow account, placed into the general funds account, and on one occasion into the commission's account. He also allowed for an earnest money disbursement from the firm's operating account. Now, as I said earlier, and I'll repeat now, commingling of funds contained within firm accounts is expressly prohibited. Full stop. That is the rule. The rules do not say that as long as nobody is harmed, commingling is fine. They don't say that the principal broker is responsible, but it's fine if somebody under him, somebody who's not even a licensee, is actually managing the accounts. The rules are clear that commingling is not permissible. At this point in time, it's hard for us to say, truly, if any of the client funds were spent, because as Mr. Forrester said, he was not aware of of the whole accounts. We can't trace specifically the dollar amounts, but we can trace the fact that the transactions happened. All that really matters at the end of the day is that Mr. Forrester was responsible, and he did not uphold that responsibility. Ultimately, I just ask the Commission to keep in mind the rules, how clear they are, and all of the testimony you've heard today. And again, we're asking that the Commission authorize a full revocation of Mr. Forrester's license. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bridges. Mr. Collins?
Yes, Your Honor. Well, I enjoy being an attorney and making great arguments. I think probably the best argument would have been for Mr. Forrester himself today. I think he spoke with a genuine and earnest spirit, and I believe like he has been forthright with this board and this commission, and I would respectfully submit to you that he is an honest and trustworthy person, as you can tell from the veracity or from his testimony here today. I would like to briefly state, I don't intend on making a grand summation or closing argument, but I would state that centrally, a lot of these regulations are centered around the regulations 1260-02-.09. And what's interesting, if you look at 09, if you ever look at the books, there's authority at the end. And when you look at the authority, you'll also notice how much these regulations have changed in the last few years. Specifically, in March 16th of 2010, several definitions were added. And then again in July 20th of 2015, only effective October of 15th. According to my own research, that's the first time we had an actual definition of commingling that you see in subsection A, and that you also added the definitions that are in 13 of that section, which is the principal allegation in this complaint, where it talks about commingling of funds contained within firm accounts is expressly prohibited. That's relatively new regulation. Not to divert too much, but not too long ago, people weren't necessarily required to have an escrow account and could have general accounts, and a lot of that grandfathering still goes on. And in fact, There's been several people before this commission that had no escrow account and they were grandfathered or had other things. Without a doubt, it's been this commission's intention to be stricter on these types of things, as you well should be. To that end, I think that Mr. Forrester has unbelievably come to understand and know how serious the handling of clients' funds are and how serious this board and this commission takes it. Notwithstanding that, if you look at the statute and you look at the true intention, it has always been to protect the public. In this case, we don't have a member of the public that has been harmed. We don't have a member of the public that has not been given funds, not been paid as they should have been, not been timely. At every point, Mr. Forrester has done everything he could to reasonably remedy any problem there was with the account once he had noticed that there was a problem with the account. He's done everything a diligent and responsible principal broker should do. We are talking about an 8-month window in time where he did not manage an employee the way he should have. There is no question that he should have had his eyes on that account. And he is the victim of trusting someone too much, which is simply something we can't do. He understands that now more than ever. The state has requested to revoke his license or otherwise demote his license and insist upon a civil penalty. I would respectfully submit that there's no doubt a fine of some sort or otherwise penalty should be assessed in this matter. While I do think Mr. Forrester understands the seriousness and understands what happened wrong and how he needs to remedy it, I think he's taken the adequate steps to do so, and I think he's learned a valuable lesson. With respect to whether or not the license should be revoked, I just don't think there's enough here for that to be the penalty. I think that would be far too severe. The real question in my mind, and hopefully in your mind, is whether or not you take away his principal broker status. I would submit to you that you have a lot of affiliates that are relying on him. He's learned his lesson. He's taken what he's had to do, and he's taken that and taught that lesson to other people. At this point, I truly feel like if anybody would be worthy of maintaining the principal broker status, I think Mr. Forrester has demonstrated that level of competence now. He recognizes the level of incompetence that was there. He recognizes the mismanagement. He recognizes what happens, and he has remedied those steps. For those reasons, I would respectfully request that Mr. Forrester be allowed to maintain his principal broker status, and I would also request that he is only assessed a civil penalty in the maximum amount of $1,000. And if there's no other questions from the board, that would be my comments.
Your Honor, could I ask a question to counsel?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Collins, looking at the notice of hearing and charges, the state requested either revocation or downgrading of the license, as well as assessment of hearing costs, et cetera. And you suggested that we should impose a civil penalty instead. Do we have the ability to assess a civil penalty when that wasn't requested in the notice of hearing itself?
I think under 6213.312 you do.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
I would agree with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. All right. Forgive me, board members. I'm going to read a little bit to you now. I know you folks do these all the time and have heard this hundreds of times probably, but I do want to get it on the record. The commission has heard the proof in this matter. It's now my duty to charge you as to the law you must follow in reaching your decision. You are the exclusive judges of the facts in this case. You also are the exclusive judges of the law, specifically the statutes, rules, and regulations, and their applications to this case. You should apply the law to the facts in deciding this case under the directions of my charge. You exclusively have the authority to make findings of fact and reach conclusions of law in this matter. No one else may participate in your deliberations. The state has alleged that the respondent has violated certain of the state's applicable statutes or rules. It is the state's burden to prove those allegations by a preponderance of the evidence. A preponderance of the evidence means the greater weight of the evidence, or that there is sufficient proven information to cause you to believe that the state's allegations provide the more probable conclusion based upon all of the evidence presented. The evidence consists of the testimony given by the witnesses during the hearing and the exhibits introduced into evidence which you may review during your deliberations. It also includes the affidavits that you have, statements and arguments by the attorneys in this case, the documents that are in the technical record but not entered into this case, such as the notice of charges, and those things are not in themselves evidence. You are the sole and exclusive judges of the credibility or believability of the witnesses who have testified in this case. You must decide which witnesses you believe and how important you think their testimony is. You're not required to accept or reject everything a witness says. You may believe all, none, or part of any person's testimony. In deciding which testimony you believe, you should rely on your own common sense and everyday experience. Along those same veins, the law does not require you to accept as true all of the evidence that I have admitted, even though it's legally competent. In determining what evidence you find persuasive, you must make your own evaluation of the testimony given by each of the witnesses and determine the degree of weight you choose to give that testimony. The testimony of a witness may fail to line up with facts as they occurred because that witness is being other than truthful, or because that witness did not accurately see or hear that about which he or she testified, because his or her memory of an event is faulty, or because he or she has not expressed him or herself clearly in that testimony. Although you may only consider the competent evidence presented during this hearing in making your decisions, this does not mean you are required to set aside your common knowledge or expertise in your field. You may, and in fact should, weigh the evidence in light of your training and your own observations and experience. You should always keep in mind that the state has the burden of proof. The respondent does not have to prove that he is innocent. The final order must contain 4 specific items. The Administrative Procedures Act requires, number 1, findings of fact, number 2, conclusions of law, number 3, a decision regarding what disciplinary action shall be taken, if any, and number 4, the policy reasons for your decision and determination. In making findings of fact, you must make your own evaluation of the testimony given by each of the witnesses and any documentary evidence admitted. You must then give that testimony or other evidence the weight and credibility that you deem proper. You may weigh the evidence in light of your own training and expertise. Once you've made your findings of fact, you must decide if the respondent's activity constitutes a violation of departmental or commission rules or state statutes as alleged in the notice of charges. And if so, you must state those determinations in the conclusions of the law section of your order. Your decision must include sufficient analysis of the evidence to clearly demonstrate how the facts of the case support your conclusions. Your conclusions of law should make appropriate specific references to your findings of fact to articulate linkages and connections between those 2 sections of your final order. With regard to the disciplinary action, if you decide that there has been a violation of a state statute or rule, then you must then decide what disciplinary action is appropriate in accordance with your legal authority and considering the particular circumstances of this case. You may consider any evidence that the parties have introduced on the issue of the appropriate disciplinary action, including whether the conduct allegedly was or is of a continuing nature or a one-time offense. Additionally, you may also consider what you have done in previous similar cases. Under the law, administrative agencies are not required to have absolute consistency in the disciplinary action they take. However, this does not mean that you may be arbitrary or capricious in deciding disciplinary actions. Disciplinary actions must be based on fairness and reason. Finally, your order must contain a policy reason. Your policy reason is your statement explaining why the particular disciplinary action you chose in this case is correct, given the wide range of cases you hear and the various disciplinary options you have. All all deliberations must be audible, in public, before all parties. It is inappropriate for the parties, their counsel, the witnesses, or commission staff to participate in your deliberations. Any action taken by the commission must pass by majority of the panel. At this point, does either party have proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law to distribute?
I do.
All right. Would you do that for me, please? All right. At this point, counsel for the state is going to distribute. Is it a proposed order, or is it?
It's just the proposed findings of fact and
Okay.
conclusions of
All
law.
right. Thank you. Proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law. You can use those as a guide. You are free to disregard those altogether. You can come up with your own. I think you've done these before, correct? Okay. And just to reiterate, was it Mr. McMullen or Mr. Wood? You are free as the commission to come up with your own disciplinary action. You can choose no disciplinary action or any disciplinary action you deem appropriate. It does not have to be what's contained in the notice of hearing. All right.
All right. Your Honor, do you have a preference if each finding of fact is voted on individually, or can we list 10 or 12 and then take one motion?
Well, I don't have a preference. I would like, it would be helpful if the findings of fact were read into the record, but they can be done all together.
All right, Commissioner McMullen, I'm going to leave it up to you whether you want to make a motion per finding of fact or.
Oh, okay. I would move that we adopt the following finding of fact. During the relevant period, the respondent, Jonathan Shane Forrester, was the principal broker of Brokers Realty and Auction, Inc., a licensed real estate firm.
Second.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Discussion. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following finding of fact. Joni Christ worked as an employee of the firm.
Second.
You've heard the motion and the second. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following finding of fact. During the relevant period, Mr. Forrester maintained 3 firm bank accounts, an escrow account, a general business funds account, and a general funds account that was designated to pay commissions.
Second.
Any discussion? Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion passes unanimously.
I move that we make the following finding of fact. Prior to August of 2017, Mr. Forrester's wife kept the books and managed the accounts of the firm, although her full-time employment was elsewhere. In August 2017, the work responsibilities of Mr. Forrester's wife changed such that Mr. Forrester placed Ms. Christ in charge of the books and accounts of the firm.
Second.
Discussion. Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Passes unanimously.
I move that we make the following finding of fact. Ms. Christ was a signatory on the firm bank accounts, and Mr. Forrester delegated authority over the accounts to Ms. Christ.
Second.
Discussion. Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. It passes unanimously.
I move that we make the following finding of fact. Mr. Forrester terminated Ms. Kreis's employment on March 7th, 2018.
Second.
Discussion. Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. It passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following finding of fact. There were 2 withdrawals from the firm escrow account that were used for personal or general business purposes, specifically on August 18, 2017, $2,000, and on August 19, 2017, $2,200.
Second.
Discussion. Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following finding of fact. There were 25 transfers from the firm escrow account to the firm's general business account, specifically on August 21, 2017, $2,500, on August 6, 2017, $2,000, on August 17, 2017, $3,500, on August 27, 2017, $2,000, on August 30, 2017, $2,000, on August 30, 2017, $3,000, on November 6, 2017, $2,000, on December 6, 2017, $2,000, on December 6, 2017, $2,000, on December 18, 2017, $1,000, on January 2nd, 2018, $1,000, on January 2nd, 2018, $1,400, on January 2nd, 2018, $2,000, on January 17, 2018, $2,000, on January 19, 2018, $1,000, on January 22nd, 2018, $500, on January 22nd, 2018, $1,500, on January 25th, 2018, $1,000, on February 5th, 2018, $500, on February 14, 2018, $5,500, on February 16, 2018, $1,000, on February 20, 2018, $2,200, on February 20, 2018, $2,500, on February 21st, 2018, $500, on February 26, 2018, $2,000. I think that's it. You'll get that one later.
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion is properly on the floor. Commissioner McMullen, on February 21st, did you say 500 or 1,500?
I said 500.
Okay.
But I'm going to do a separate finding on the money that went into the commission's account, which was $1,500 on February 21st.
Okay.
McMullen, there are 2 other transfers on page 3, referencing February 26, 2018 of $2,000, and April 5th of 2018, a transfer of $7,591. Did you want those included in this finding of fact as well?
I was going to do the 7591 separately because that wasn't a transfer. And then I thought I included the February 26, 2018 of 2000. I think that was my last one.
All right, other questions? The motion is to approve the finding of fact that itemize those particular transfers. Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously. Mr. McMullen.
There was one transfer from the firm's escrow account to the firm's commission account, which was on February 21st, 2018, $1,500.
Is that a motion?
Yes, that's my motion, sorry.
Second.
For a finding of
All right,
fact.
you've heard the proposed finding of fact. Discussion. Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously. Mr. McMullen.
I move that we make the following finding of fact. There was one check from the firm's escrow account that was deposited to the firm's general business account, which was on April 5th, 2018, in the amount of $7,591.
Second.
Discussion. Let's vote. Those who agree with that finding of fact vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion passes unanimously.
I move that we make the following finding of fact. There were 2 transfers of escrow funds from the firm's general business account to the firm's escrow account, which were on March 23rd, 2018, $35,288.90, and on March 23, 2018, $1,951.40.
Second.
Okay. And those two total $37,240 approximately. Okay. All right. Any discussion? Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following finding of fact. There was one payment of escrow funds directly from the firm's general business account, which was on March 9th, 2018, in the amount of $13,059.70.
Second.
Discussion? Let's vote. Those in favor of that finding of fact vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following finding of fact. On numerous occasions, transfers to the firm's general account were necessary to prevent the general account from being overdrawn, as shown by the bank account statements, including on October 17, 2017, October 30, 2017, November 6, 2017, December 6, 2017, December 18, 2017, January 2nd, 2018, January 17th, 2018, January 19th, 2018, January 22nd, 2018, February 5th, 2018, February 14th, 2018, February 16th, 2018, February 20th, 2018, and February 26th, 2018.
Second.
All right. Discussion? You've heard the motion. If you agree with that finding of fact, please vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following finding of fact. On other occasions, transfers to the firm's general account were necessary to prevent the general account from potentially being overdrawn, as shown by the general funds ledger, including on August 21st, 2017, and October 27th, 2017.
Second.
Discussion? Let's vote. Those who agree with that finding of fact vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following finding of fact. Mr. Forrester is no longer the principal broker of the firm. He has hired another principal broker to serve as principal broker. Mr. Forrester remains the owner of the firm.
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously. Other commissioners, other findings of fact? All right, last call. All right, Mr. McMullen, let's get to the conclusion of the law phase of this discussion. See if you can help us with that.
Okay. I move that we make the following conclusion of law. Tennessee Code Annotated 6213-321 and Rule 1260-02-092 requires each principal broker to maintain an escrow account.
Second.
Discussion? All right, if you believe that's a law or a rule pertinent to this case, you'll vote aye. Those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion passes unanimously.
I move that we make the following conclusion of law. Rule 1260-02-094 provides that a principal broker is responsible at all times for trust or escrow money accepted by him or any affiliates under his supervision.
Second.
Discussion? Let's vote. Those who agree with that vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion passes unanimously.
I move that we make the following conclusion of law. Rule 1260-02-097 authorizes the principal broker to disperse earnest money funds only when a disbursement is made pursuant to the terms of a written agreement signed by all the parties at the closing of a transaction, upon the rejection or withdrawal of an offer, upon filing an interpleader, or pursuant to a court order.
Second.
Discussion? Let's vote. Those who agree vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following conclusion of law. Rule 1260-02-091A defines commingling as the act of a licensee maintaining funds belonging to others in the same bank account that contains his or her personal or business funds.
Second.
Questions? Let's vote. Those who agree, vote aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, no. That motion passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following conclusion of law. Rule 1260-02-0913 prohibits commingling of funds contained in a real estate firm's accounts.
Second.
Discussion. Those in favor of the motion, vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously.
Move that we make the following conclusion of law. Mr. Forrester violated 1260-02-0913 on 32 occasions when he commingled funds that belonged to others with funds that were belonging to him personally or to his business.
Second.
Discussion. Those in favor of that motion, vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously.
Okay, we'll have one here. Tennessee Code Annotated 62-13312B14 provides that the Commission may take disciplinary action in the form of suspension or revocation upon finding that a licensee has violated any statute, rule, or lawful order entered by the Commission.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Wood steps up and proposes the conclusion of law. He's just read into the record. Ms. Frank seconds that. Is there discussion on his motion? Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion, vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously. Mr. Wood.
Okay, and Tennessee Code Annotated 62-13312C provides that the Commission may also assess discipline by ordering that the principal broker's license be downgraded to the status of affiliate broker.
Second.
The motion by Mr. Wood and seconded by Ms. Franks. It's just been read into the record. If you're in agreement with that, please vote aye.
Aye.
If you're opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously. Mr. Wood.
Tennessee Code 1260-02-32-1 further authorizes the Commission to assess civil penalties in lieu of or in addition to any other lawful disciplinary action for each separate violation of a statute, rule, or order in amounts not to exceed $1,000 per violation.
Second.
Just to clarify that one, that's under the Tennessee rules and not the Tennessee Code. But
thank you.
Yep.
That's what he meant to say, I'm
Yes,
sure.
that's right.
All right, you've heard the motion offered by Mr. Wood, seconded by Ms. Franks. Discussion. Let's vote. Those in favor of that motion, vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously.
And Tennessee Rules 1260-02.323 provides that each day of a continued violation may constitute a separate violation.
Second.
All right, Mr. Wood offers another finding of conclusion of law that Ms. Franks seconds. You've heard it. Discussion. Let's vote. Those in favor of that finding of conclusion of law, please vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously. Mr. Wood, anything else?
Nope.
Other commissioners? All right, I'm going to declare that that section of our deliberation is concluded, and now we move on to the disciplinary phase. And the floor will be open for discussion, or the chair will entertain a motion at any point. So, would anyone like to start the discussion and/or make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right.
I move that we assess a civil penalty in the amount of $32,000 and that we assess the investigatory and hearing costs on the respondent.
You have heard the motion from Mr. McMullen. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Mr. Diaz. Now that motion and discussion of that motion is on the floor properly. Is there discussion? Mr. Wood.
But leave the license alone?
That's my motion.
Okay.
Would you like to make a substitute motion?
No, I'm just thinking out loud.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Since
here.
they won't let us go back here in the back talk. So And I try to equate this to anything else I've seen. And I know one other time we had a person come in, but they had a issue with the earnest money. But if I remember, we asked what happened to it, and he said, I loaned it to somebody. And I don't see that we've loaned anything here. I mean, I think it's more bad record keeping than I'm a bad person. I got scolded many years ago by a person from the Real Estate Commission because we were closing, say, on Friday, but the agent wouldn't bring their check in until Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever they wanted the money. And then we were leaving the earnest money in the account. And he goes, well, you're commingling. I says, because here in Middle Tennessee, a lot of times they just deduct the earnest money from our commission. And I'd say, okay, I'll argue that because his point was, once it closes, it's no longer earnest money, it's my personal funds, or company personal funds. And I said, okay, I'll give you that. And I said, but that's commingling good, that's not commingling bad. And he goes, commingling is commingling, you know. I guess my point is, I don't know that I think suspension is the right answer. I would just kind of think broker, but maybe make some opportunity to come back as a broker at some point in the future.
So if we downgrade to an affiliate, where's our attorneys? Would I can't ask their attorney?
Just talk out loud.
Okay, so what I'm wanting to know is if we downgrade him to affiliate, would he have to wait 3 years before he could set for the broker's exam again? I think that's right, isn't it?
I think that if you're interested in following that line of thinking, that you could make a motion and put any parameters on it you wanted to.
We already have a motion.
Well, you can make a substitute, or like you said, you're just talking out loud, Sue.
Okay, I'd like to make a substitute motion.
All right.
I'd like to make the substitute motion that we downgrade his license to affiliate broker.
Indefinitely?
No, not indefinitely.
Did you want to
also want those other parts in there?
I thought if we took him down to affiliate, then I'm not so much concerned about the $32,000 that Mr. McMullen seems to think was appropriate. I think that would be harsher than the $32,000 actually to downgrade him. So I'm not including. I would include the court costs though.
So you want to downgrade to an affiliate broker status, but not indefinitely. So could you give us a date certain when he could reapply?
Well, that's why I was wanting to ask. Is the law an affiliate has to wait for 3 years?
I think you have the latitude to say he can't be principal broker for a year, but after a year he could be again.
Oh, really?
If you wanted, if I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm just.
Can we say 6 months? Do you think we could do that?
You can. I think you have the latitude to do what you want to at this point.
Let's make it 1 year. Let's make it 1 year.
But Marcia, I also.
Microphone, please.
I think, to me, beside the hearing and investigative costs, there should be a fine of some sort. I don't think, to me, even if you took a partial amount of the 30, the maximum is the 32,000 that we could. That's for each thing. But I do feel like there was a mistake made.
Well, downgrading him
oversight.
to affiliate is one of the worst things we could do. We could revoke him. We're not doing that, and I'm not saying do that. But I would say reduce him to affiliate for 1 year, and then he'll have to set for the broker's exam again.
I would say at least $10,000 on top
So
of that.
let's go this one step at a time. So you're making a motion. At this point, I think the motion is to downgrade his license to affiliate broker for a period of 1 year. Yes. Is that the end of your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I think she also had the investigatory
The court costs.
And, I'm going to assume those are going to apply to any motion we have.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to Ms. Frank's motion? Substitute motion. Last call. Second to Ms. Frank's substitute motion. The chair is going to rule that motion dies for lack of a second. The floor is back open. Ms. Taylor, anything more you'd like to add?
Yes, I think I would make the motion to downgrade his license to affiliate broker for a 1-year term and have assess a fine of $12,000 civil penalty, and for him to pay the hearing and investigative costs.
All right, so Ms. Taylor has offered a motion that if I can get a second and it
Second.
passes, and it's now properly seconded, would downgrade Mr. Forrester's license to an affiliate broker status for a period of 1 year. Is that right? And include a $12,000 civil penalty. That motion is properly in front of us. It's considered a substitute motion at this point. So we're going to vote on the substitute motion after discussion. If it passes, we're done. If it fails, we'll go back to Mr. McMullen's motion of a $32,000 civil penalty.
Now, when you repeated it, you didn't put in the hearing and investigative costs. Okay.
Unless I stated otherwise, any motion I
All right.
proclaim is going to
Right,
include
okay.
those two.
All right, thank you.
All right, discussion on Ms. Taylor's motion. A downgrade
So
to,
what happens at the end of 12 months? Does he have to take the test again, or is it automatic it goes back to broker?
That's why we need a lawyer.
I think he has to take the test again and
You
go
can say-
through the. I think that he has to take. I will put it in my motion that he has to take the test, be retested for broker, and go with the taking the appropriate courses, and going through the proper channels.
So he would need the 120 hours again
Yes. Mm-hmm.
all right,
Actually, 120 hours comes in after the fact.
after the brokers. He
Yeah.
passes the brokers again.
all right, so I'll give you my thoughts on this and why I'm going to vote against Ms. Taylor's motion. And if it gets to Mr. McMullen's motion, well, I'll vote for it. I think in the best interest, to me, is clearly in the best interest of this company for Mr. Forrester to be the principal broker, not the currently acting principal broker, who apparently doesn't want to do it, has no desire to do it, really has no authority to do it other than to be the punching bag in case there's a complaint filed against the company for failure to supervise. So my thought is I would rather have Mr. Forrester, who's also owning the company, be the person who's liable and responsible and, frankly, who can write checks and does on occasion. So I'm not for downgrading the license because I want Mr. Forrester back being the principal broker because he would be the responsible party at that point. That's me.
So that would be setting a precedent that we've never.
I don't know what precedent it would set. I'm just speaking against a motion.
It would set a precedent that we didn't downgrade someone for commingling funds, earnest money funds.
I would disagree with that. I mean, you have to take all the facts and circumstances of each case on their own merit. And, in this situation, I think there certainly was a lack of supervision and an excessive delegation that occurred here. I think everybody recognizes that. Mistakes were definitely made. On the other hand, we don't have a situation of, consumers who were left, short of money. And we have a respondent who appears to me to be very contrite about what happened, and I think has been, for the most part, forthcoming in his testimony, and I think has taken steps to ensure that this sort of thing won't happen again. I don't know that we'll ever see a case exactly like this again. The next one, maybe it will be exactly like it, but it very likely will be different. Wouldn't take a vote to only issue a civil penalty here to mean that in every commingling case we're only going to do a civil penalty. I think it has to be based on the facts and circumstances of each case, and especially one like this that's just so fact intensive and probably unique among what we will end up seeing.
Okay, other comments,
Yes.
Ms. Taylor?
I feel that in spite of the commingling of funds, there's been some very sloppy bookkeeping, like using his personal funds for this and then paying it back and doing that. And I think that that's an issue. It's certainly the commingling of funds from the earnest money account is the primary cause. But I think his bookkeeping practices are really sloppy.
Thank you. Other comments? All right, we're going to vote on Ms. Taylor's motion, which, if it passes, would downgrade Mr. Forrester's license to an affiliate broker status for a period of 1 year, at which point he would be allowed to retest to regain his principal broker's test as long as he met all requirements needed to get your principal broker's license and keep it, and a $12,000 civil penalty as well as investigative costs. That's what's in front of us. If you're in favor of that motion, in a moment I'll ask for you to vote aye. If you're opposed to that motion, please vote no. Any questions before we go forward? Let's see how this goes on a voice vote. Those in favor of the motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
For the record, the chair determines that there were 2 aye votes, Ms. Franks, Ms. Taylor, and 4 no votes, the balance of the commission. All right, now we're back to the main motion, which is Mr. McMullen's motion. It, if passed, would offer a civil penalty of $32,000, $1,000 for each event determined by our auditor and listed in the findings of fact, as well as assessment of investigative costs. Any discussion or anyone need clarification on that motion? Are you ready to vote? Let's do it. Those in favor of that motion vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
That motion passes on 4 ayes and 2 no votes. The 2 no votes for Ms. Taylor and Ms. Franks. All right, so that takes care of the disciplinary portion of our discussions. Mr. McMullen, can you help us with a policy reason?
See what I can come up with off the
Okay.
cuff. Protection of funds belonging to others and not commingling funds are among some of the very important responsibilities that are imposed on brokers, and a violation of those should not be taken lightly. In this situation, we had a number of clear violations. On the other hand, there were mitigating circumstances, including the fact that Ms. Kreis may have been acting on her own on some of these, and also the fact that it does not appear that any consumers were harmed in this situation. On the other hand, these are serious offenses because of the need to protect funds that belong to others, and the civil penalty that has been imposed is a significant monetary penalty that will affect Mr. Forrester. I believe that the decision is also justified by the contrition that Mr. Forrester has showed and the efforts he has made to ensure that this sort of thing does not happen again. And we believe that this penalty will be sufficient to remind him of this circumstance and to ensure that it does not happen again in the future. And so that would be my motion, that we adopt that as a narrative policy statement.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. McMullen. Anybody like to agree with that policy statement in second? Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Discussion, I think it was fairly straightforward and quite well composed. Thank you, sir. Let's vote. Those in favor of that policy statement being adopted, please vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously. Judge Barnhill, back to you.
Thank you very much for your service today. Ms. Bridges, would you file a copy of that order in my office whenever it's done?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Is there any other business regarding this case? All right. Is the board continuing on after this?
We do have just a piece or two of business.
All right. Then this hearing is concluded, and I'll close the record, and I'll turn it back over to Chairman.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you. All right, Commissioners, anything we didn't ask for closing statements yesterday as we end up our meeting. Anyone have any comments they'd like to make?
It remember yesterday.
Well, what Ms. Taylor wants to say is she's looking forward to hosting us in Memphis next month.
I am. That's
We're looking forward to getting down there, and we appreciate all the hard
Right,
work you
thank
put
you.
into putting this together. Mr. McMullen.
Chairman, it's unlikely I will be able to attend the first day of the meeting in Germantown, but my plan is to get up on Friday morning and drive over for the formal hearing on the second day in Germantown. So I will see you all at that time.
So you would like to be alerted in case that hearing is canceled or postponed?
I would very much like to be alerted at the earliest possible moment, and will provide my cell phone to anyone who has that information to let me know.
As all of us would. I
think. But and that assumes that the governor doesn't appoint somebody to replace me between now and then. So, and if he does, then I wish you all bon voyage.
We'll have a call in for the governor not to do that till then.
So, Jeff, this was your first formal hearing. What's your takeaway?
Well, I liked having more information to base the decision and have it presented for us. I think it's, legislative heft is what they call it. So I just thought it was really interesting and see the order of the proceedings and hear from the respondent directly. I think added a lot to the debate and the deliberation.
All right. Anything else? Mr. Wood.
On behalf of the rest of the commissioners, I'd like to thank Austin McMillan for being here today. He carried a lot of the heavy lifting, so we appreciate it. And I sure am glad to hear that he's coming to Memphis next month.
We got a basket of snacks in the back.
We've got that MVP trophy, too.
Yes, he did.
And as,
Keep the granola bars coming.
That's right.
and as we all know, that day could come and we just get a call or something. So hopefully it won't be anytime soon, but should it happen between now and the next meeting, I would like for us to all thank Austin for all he's done all these years. You've just been the best, and we really appreciate it.
It's like you're kissing him goodbye. We're not ready to do that.
I don't want it left unsaid.
I know. Those are good words.
No, I agree with that. Austin has been, he's just been one of the hearts and souls of this commission with his knowledge and his expertise and his.
Does that mean? Did you mean to say that some commissioners are heartless and
soulless?
I am.
It's more about his. If he was replaced, I would beg the governor to replace him with someone just like Austin, an attorney
of his same age and office and next door to him.
Yes.
In a certain company. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Motion adjourned.
Can I just say one more thing?
You sure can.
I'll just say this to legal. This was very difficult, all this paper. And getting the affidavit that we had to read, Caitlin's response, that it just was very difficult. And it just worries me that did we miss anything when there's this much paper? So I don't know what else you could have done, but we appreciate all your efforts. I know you went to a lot of work on this.
Thank you.
I followed it.
Thank you.
Very well.
Yeah.
All right, we are adjourned.
See you in Memphis in May.